When a scarred woman nobody wanted stood shivering on an auction block in 1878, freezing wind wasn't the only thing cutting through her bones. It was the laughter of men bidding on her sisters like livestock. Then a stranger rode through the blizzard and did something that silenced the entire town. What happened next turned a broken girl into the most feared woman in the Colorado Rockies. This is her story, raw, violent, and unforgivable. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this tale travels. Hit that like button and let's begin. The wind screamed through Black Hollow like something dying. Eliza Thornfield stood on the wooden platform with splinters digging into her bare feet, watching her oldest sister Rebecca get dragged away by a fat mine owner who smelled like whiskey and tobacco spit. Rebecca didn't look back. Couldn't, probably. Her face had gone blank the moment the bidding started, like she'd left her body behind and floated somewhere safer. Eliza wished she could do that. Next up, Margaret Thornfield, age 19. Mayor Vernon Hale's voice boomed across the town square, and Eliza felt her middle sister flinch beside her. Margaret had always been the pretty one, with soft brown curls and doe eyes that made men stutter. Those same eyes were red now, swollen from crying, but it didn't matter. 3 ranchers started shouting numbers before Hale even finished reading her description. The youngest sister, Clara, gripped Eliza's hand so hard her fingernails drew blood. Clara was only 14. Sweet, gentle Clara who collected wildflowers and sang hymns while hanging laundry. She shouldn't be here. None of them should. But their father had gambled away everything they owned, including his daughters. Sold to Samuel Pritchard for $45. Margaret stumbled down the platform steps, nearly falling before Pritchard caught her arm. He wasn't rough about it, but he wasn't gentle either, just transactional, like he'd purchased a horse and was inspecting his investment. Eliza's stomach twisted. Clara Thornfield, age 14. No. The word came out before Eliza could stop it. Hale's eyes snapped toward her, cold and annoyed. Shut your mouth, girl. You'll get your turn. She's a child. She's property. Hale smiled, showing tobacco-stained teeth. Your father's debts don't care about age. The bidding started fast. Too fast. Men Eliza had known her whole life, shopkeepers, ranch hands, the blacksmith who used to give them penny candy, suddenly transformed into something else entirely. Their faces changed when they looked at Clara. Hungry, predatory, $60, $70, $85. Clara started hyperventilating, her small chest heaving under her thin dress. Eliza wanted to wrap her arms around her baby sister, shield her from the leering faces, but the auctioneer's assistant, a wiry man named Dutch, kept his rifle pointed squarely at Eliza's spine. $90. The winner was a cattle rancher named Morrison from 3 valleys over. Eliza knew his reputation. 2 previous wives, both dead under mysterious circumstances. The marshal had investigated the second death but found nothing conclusive. Clara screamed when Morrison's hands closed around her shoulders. Please, she twisted toward Eliza, tears streaming. Eliza, please don't let him. Morrison backhanded her across the mouth. The crack echoed across the square, followed by Clara's choked sob. Blood trickled from her split lip, and something inside Eliza snapped. She lunged forward, murder in her eyes, but Dutch slammed the rifle butt into her kidney. Pain exploded through her back, and she collapsed, gasping. Easy now. Dutch's breath reeked. You're next, sweetheart. Try to look pretty. Through blurred vision, Eliza watched Morrison drag Clara toward a waiting wagon. Her sister's cries faded into the wind, swallowed by the same bitter cold that had been killing this town slowly for years. Then it was just Eliza, alone on the platform, the last Thornfield daughter. Mayor Hale studied her like a rancher evaluating a lame horse, his expression somewhere between disgust and calculation. Eliza knew what he saw, the long scar running from her left eyebrow to her jaw, courtesy of her father's belt buckle 3 years ago. The defiant posture that had earned her beating since childhood. The hard eyes that had watched too much, survived too much, and refused to break. Eliza Thornfield, Hale announced, his voice notably less enthusiastic. Age 22, strong back, can cook, clean, and work a field. Silence. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few men whispered to each other, shaking their heads. One spat tobacco juice and walked away entirely. Starting bid, $30. Nothing. Eliza felt humiliation crawl up her spine like ice water, but she kept her chin high. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. $25. Hale's jaw clenched. Come on now, gentlemen, she's healthy, serviceable. Serviceable. Like a plow horse. A younger man near the front, Billy Thompson, the assayer's son, raised his hand tentatively. $10? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted, "Too much for that face!" More laughter, meaner this time. Billy's hand dropped. Hale's face reddened. $15, final offer. Someone take her off my hands. The wind picked up, sending snow devils spinning across the platform. Eliza's threadbare dress did nothing against the cold. She could feel frostbite creeping into her toes, but she didn't move. Didn't beg. Just stood there while Black Hollow collectively decided she wasn't worth $15. 10, Hale said through gritted teeth. 10 goddamn dollars. Nobody moved. Nobody. The mayor's hand went to his pistol, and for a terrible moment Eliza thought he might just shoot her and be done with it. But then Dutch leaned over and whispered something in his ear. Hale's expression shifted from rage to cruel amusement. Well now, he smiled at Eliza. Looks like nobody wants you, girl. Guess you'll be coming with me after all. Town needs a new cleaning woman for the jail cells. You can work off your father's debt scrubbing piss and vomit for the next 20 years. How's that sound? It sounded like death. Slow, grinding death. Unless... Hale stepped closer, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper that still carried across the square. Unless you'd prefer private arrangement. I got a cabin needs tending, warm bed, regular meals. His eyes crawled over her body. All you gotta do is be grateful. Eliza's hand twitched toward the small knife hidden in her boot. She'd kill him right here. Let them hang her for it. Better than hoofbeats. Every head turned toward the sound. Through the swirling snow came a rider, moving fast despite the treacherous ice coating the main road. The horse was huge, a gray stallion that looked like it had been carved from storm clouds, and the man on its back sat like he'd been born in the saddle. He pulled up 20 feet from the platform, and the stallion snorted steam into the freezing air. The rider was maybe 35, with dark hair going silver at the temples and a face that looked like it had been in more fights than Eliza could count. A scar bisected his left eyebrow, similar to hers, actually. His coat was thick leather lined with fur, worn but well-maintained, and a rifle hung from his saddle alongside a revolver on each hip. But it was his eyes that made Eliza's breath catch. Pale blue, almost gray, and completely unreadable. He looked at the crowd the way a wolf looks at sheep. Well, well. Hale recovered first, plastering on his politician's smile. Colt Maddox, didn't expect to see you in civilized territory. Wouldn't call this civilized. Maddox's voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. His gaze swept across the platform, taking in the auction setup, the remaining daughter, the leering men. Something cold flickered in his expression. What's happening here? Just settling some debts? Hale waved dismissively. Nothing that concerns you. Maddox's attention fixed on Eliza. She met his stare, refusing to look away even though something about him made her want to run. He wasn't like the other men in Black Hollow. They were predators, sure, but common ones. This man was different, dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with lust or greed. You selling people, Maddox said. Not a question. Settling debts, Hale repeated, irritation creeping into his voice. Their father owes money all over town. This is legal resolution of... How much for her? Silence crashed down like an avalanche. Hale blinked. I'm sorry? The girl. Maddox nodded toward Eliza. How much? Mayor Hale's smile returned, sharper this time. Well now, that's complicated. See, nobody's actually bid on this one yet, so technically, name a price. The crowd pressed closer, sensing drama. Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't know if this was better or worse than Hale's offer. At least she knew what the mayor wanted. This stranger was an unknown variable, and unknown usually meant dangerous. Hale rubbed his chin, calculating. $100. Plus her father's outstanding debts. That's another $47. Call it $150, total. Someone in the crowd gasped. Billy Thompson had offered $10 and been laughed at. $150 was insulting. Maddox didn't even blink. Fine. Fine, Hale laughed. Son, you understand what I'm... Maddox reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a leather pouch. He tossed it to Hale, who fumbled the catch. When the mayor opened it, his face went white. Gold nuggets. Raw, unprocessed, and clearly fresh from some high mountain stream. The pouch alone was worth $300, maybe more. Keep the change, Maddox said flatly. The square erupted in whispers. Men pushed forward to get a better look at the gold, their eyes gleaming with sudden greed. Eliza saw the calculations happening in real time. If this drifter was carrying that much gold casually, how much more did he have hidden? Hale recovered quickly, his merchant's instinct overriding his shock. Well, that's mighty generous, Mr. Maddox. Dutch, get the girl down from... No. Hale froze. Excuse me? Maddox dismounted, his boots hitting the frozen ground with a solid thud. He walked toward the platform with the slow, deliberate pace of a man who'd never been afraid of anything in his life. I'm not buying her, he said. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Eliza felt it too. What the hell was happening? Maddox stopped at the base of the platform, looking up at her with those unreadable wolf eyes. I'm marrying her. The world tilted. That's... Hale sputtered. You can't just... Federal law says I can. Maddox's voice stayed calm, but something dangerous edged underneath it. Voluntary marriage nullifies debt contracts. Homestead Act of 62, Section 7, Subsection 4. Girl agrees to marry me, she's no longer her father's property. She's mine, legal and binding. Eliza's mind raced. Marriage. To a complete stranger. A man who clearly lived hard and probably killed harder. But the alternative was Hale's cabin, or 20 years scrubbing jail cells, or worse. You know the law pretty well for a drifter, Hale said suspiciously. I know what I need to know. Maddox's attention shifted back to Eliza. Well, she should say no, should run, or fight, or do literally anything except agree to this insane proposal from a man whose name she'd only learned 5 minutes ago. But Clara's screams still echoed in her ears. Rebecca's blank face, Margaret's red eyes. What do you want? Eliza's voice came out steadier than she felt. Why would you do this? Something flickered in Maddox's expression, not quite emotion, but close. Got my reasons. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting right now. He extended his hand toward her. Make your choice, girl. Him, he nodded toward Hale, or me. The mayor's face had gone purple with rage, but he couldn't do anything, not legally, not with the whole town watching. Eliza looked at Maddox's outstretched hand. Scarred knuckles, calluses from rope and reins, dried blood under the fingernails, recent by the look of it. This was a man who lived violently and would probably die the same way. But he'd also just spent a fortune to give her a choice. She took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, despite the cold. He pulled her down from the platform with surprising gentleness, steadying her when her half-frozen feet nearly gave out. Mayor Hale, Maddox said, still holding Eliza's hand. You got a preacher in this shithole? Hale looked like he'd swallowed a wasp. Reverend Michaels, but you can't seriously... Get him, now. The crowd parted as Maddox led Eliza toward the church at the end of the square. She stumbled once, her feet screaming with frostbite pain, and without a word, Maddox scooped her up like she weighed nothing. His coat smelled like pine smoke and horse in winter. Put me down, Eliza said. I can walk. Your feet are half frozen. Don't be stupid. I said put me down. Maddox stopped and set her down carefully. Their eyes met, and for the first time Eliza saw something almost like respect in his expression. Stubborn, he said. Alive, she replied. The corner of his mouth twitched. Might have been a smile once. Hard to tell. They walked the rest of the way side by side, Eliza limping badly but refusing help. Behind them, the crowd followed like ravens scenting carrion. Everyone wanted to witness this disaster unfold. Reverend Michaels was a thin, nervous man who clearly wanted no part of this, but Hale's presence and the promise of violence in Maddox's eyes convinced him otherwise. The ceremony lasted maybe 3 minutes, performed in the freezing church with Eliza's teeth chattering and Maddox standing like a statue. Do you, Eliza Thornfield, take this man? Yes. As your lawfully wedded? I said yes. Michaels flinched. Right. And do you, Colt Maddox? Yeah. I now pronounce you. We're done. Maddox turned to leave, but Michaels grabbed his arm. You need to sign the register. Maddox stared at the Reverend's hand until he let go, then walked over and scratched his name in the church records with aggressive strokes. Eliza signed below it, her handwriting shaky from cold and shock. Mrs. Eliza Maddox. It didn't feel real. Outside, Hale was waiting with Dutch and 3 other men, all armed. Now hold on just a minute. We're done here. Maddox moved past them toward his horse. The hell you are? Hale's voice rose. You can't just ride into my town, throw gold around, and steal. Steal? Maddox turned slowly. I paid. You accepted. Got witnesses and signed documents. We married legal. What exactly did I steal, Mayor? Hale's hand drifted toward his pistol. Dutch and the others followed suit. The crowd went very quiet. Eliza's heart hammered. This was it. Maddox would pull his guns, men would die, and she'd end up right back where she started. But Maddox didn't draw. Just stood there, completely relaxed, like he was waiting for a stagecoach instead of facing 5 armed men. You really want to do this? His voice was almost gentle. In front of all these witnesses? You shoot a married man who paid his debts legal and proper. Federal marshal's going to have questions. Might start investigating other things, like why you're auctioning off young girls, or where all that railroad money disappeared to 3 years back. Hale's face went from purple to white. That's what I thought. Maddox walked to his horse and mounted in one smooth motion. Then he reached down toward Eliza. Come on. She hesitated. This was her last chance to refuse, to take her chances with Hale or run into the wilderness alone, or... Maddox's expression softened, just slightly. I'm not him, he said quietly. Whatever you're thinking, I'm not that. Eliza didn't know if she believed him, but she took his hand anyway and let him pull her up behind him on the saddle. His coat was thick enough that she could barely get her arms around him, but she managed. Hold on, Maddox said. The stallion wheeled and took off at a gallop, snow spraying up from its hooves. Eliza grabbed Maddox's coat tighter as Black Hollow blurred past. The auction platform, the leering faces, the church, all of it disappearing into the white haze. They rode hard for maybe 10 minutes before Eliza realized she was crying. Silent, frozen tears that the wind stole as fast as they fell. She'd escaped. But into what? The town disappeared behind them, swallowed by the blizzard that had been threatening all day. Maddox guided the stallion with subtle pressure from his knees, leaving his hands free to hold the reins loosely. He didn't speak, didn't acknowledge Eliza's tears, just rode with the kind of focus that suggested he'd made this journey 1,000 times. After an hour, Eliza's entire body was numb. The cold had seeped through her thin dress, through her skin, all the way to her bones. She couldn't feel her hands anymore, couldn't feel her feet. Her teeth chattered so hard she thought they might crack. Maddox must have noticed because he suddenly pulled the stallion to a stop. Without a word, he shrugged out of his heavy coat and twisted in the saddle to wrap it around Eliza. No, she tried to protest, but he cut her off. Don't be stupid. You'll die of exposure before we reach the ranch. What about you? I've survived worse. He kicked the stallion back into motion, this time at a slightly slower pace. The coat was still warm from his body heat, and Eliza nearly sobbed with relief as feeling began creeping back into her limbs. She burrowed into the fur lining, breathing in that pine smoke smell, and tried to process what had just happened. Married. She was married. To a stranger. Where are we going? Her voice barely carried over the wind. My ranch. 3 hours north. 3 hours in this? Eliza looked at the swirling snow, the visibility maybe 20 feet in any direction. I know the way. He did, apparently. The stallion never hesitated, never stumbled, following some invisible trail that only Maddox could see. They climbed steadily upward, the terrain getting rockier and more treacherous. Why? Eliza finally asked, the question she'd been holding since the platform. Why what? Why did you do it? Buy me. Marry me. You don't know me. I could be anyone. Maddox was silent for a long moment, then, had my reasons. You said that already. Still true. Eliza's temper flared despite the cold. I deserve to know what I just signed up for. You signed up for not being a slave to Mayor Hale. Everything else is details. Details? She laughed, bitter and sharp. You just spent a fortune and married a complete stranger. That's not details. That's insanity. Maybe. Maybe. Eliza wanted to hit him. What kind of man does this? Maddox glanced back at her, and in his eyes she saw something ancient and tired, the kind who keeps promises. Before she could push further, he pulled the stallion to a stop. They'd reached a narrow pass between two cliff faces, barely wide enough for the horse. The wind screamed through it like a living thing. "We walk from here," Maddox said, dismounting. "Too dangerous to ride." Eliza slid down, her legs nearly buckling. Maddox caught her elbow, steadying her, then took the stallion's reins and started forward. Eliza followed, feet screaming with every step. The pass seemed endless. Snow piled up to their knees in places, and the wind tried to tear them off the path. Twice Eliza slipped on hidden ice, and twice Maddox caught her without breaking stride. Finally, they emerged onto a wider trail, and Maddox helped Eliza back onto the horse. She was shaking so badly she could barely hold on. "Almost there," he said. 20 minutes later, through the blizzard haze, Eliza saw light. A cabin materialized from the white, substantial, 2 stories, with smoke rising from a stone chimney. Outbuildings clustered nearby, including what looked like a barn and a smokehouse. This wasn't some thrown-together prospector's shack. This was a real homestead. Maddox rode straight to the barn, dismounted, and pulled the doors open. Inside was dry, warm, insulated against the storm. 2 other horses occupied stalls, along with several goats and a milk cow. "Take my coat off," Maddox said, already working on the stallion's tack. "Hang it by the door." Eliza obeyed, her fingers clumsy with cold. Underneath the coat, Maddox wore a simple wool shirt and vest. He showed no sign of discomfort despite having ridden for hours in the freezing wind. "How are you not frozen?" Eliza asked. "Practice." He finished with the stallion, giving the horse fresh hay and water, then turned to Eliza. "Can you walk?" "I can—" Her legs gave out. Maddox caught her before she hit the ground, swept her up again, and carried her out of the barn toward the cabin. This time, Eliza didn't protest. She was too tired, too cold, too overwhelmed. The cabin's interior was a shock. Warm air hit her face like a physical force, and she gasped at the sudden change. Maddox kicked the door shut behind them and carried her to a chair near the fireplace, where a low fire still burned. "Stay there," he ordered, then disappeared into another room. Eliza looked around, stunned. The cabin was nice. Clean wooden floors, sturdy furniture, shelves lined with books. A large table dominated the main room, with a cast-iron stove in the corner and a well-stocked kitchen area. Furs covered the floor and walls, providing insulation and decoration. This didn't match the rough drifter who'd ridden into Black Hollow. Maddox returned with blankets, which he wrapped around Eliza without ceremony. Then he knelt and started unlacing her boots. What was left of them, anyway. "I can do that." "Be quiet." His hands were surprisingly gentle as he removed her boots and examined her feet. They were blue-white, with dark patches that might be frostbite. Maddox's jaw tightened, but he didn't comment, just stood and fetched a basin of water. "This is going to hurt," he warned. He wasn't lying. When he placed her feet in the lukewarm water, Eliza bit back a scream. It felt like knives stabbing into her flesh, like her feet were being torn apart from the inside. "Breathe," Maddox said. "Just breathe through it." Eliza gripped the chair arms so hard her knuckles went white, tears streaming down her face. The pain was extraordinary, worse than anything her father had ever done to her. She wanted to pull her feet out, wanted to run, wanted— Maddox's hand closed over hers. Not restraining, just present. "You're doing fine," he said quietly. "Couple more minutes." His hand was warm, calloused, steady. Eliza focused on it, used it as an anchor while the pain slowly, agonizingly began to fade. After what felt like hours but was probably 10 minutes, Maddox removed her feet and dried them carefully. "No permanent damage," he announced. "You'll be sore for a few days, but you'll keep all your toes." "Lucky me," Eliza managed. Maddox's mouth twitched again, that almost smile. He stood and moved to the stove, where he poured something from a pot into a tin cup. "Drink this." It was soup, actual soup, with vegetables and what tasted like venison. Eliza's stomach cramped with sudden hunger. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. Slow, Maddox warned, but she was already gulping it down. The warmth spread through her chest, her stomach, her whole body. It was the best thing she'd ever tasted. Maddox refilled her cup without comment, then fixed himself some and sat in the chair opposite hers. They ate in silence. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled, but inside was warm and safe. Safe. The word felt foreign. "There's a bedroom upstairs," Maddox said eventually, not looking at her. "Clean sheets, door locks from the inside." Eliza stiffened. "Where will you sleep?" "Down here." He nodded toward a bedroll near the fireplace. "We're married." "Doesn't mean what you think it means, not here." Maddox set his empty cup aside. "I married you to get you out of Black Hollow, that's all. You're free to leave whenever you want, once the spring thaw comes." Eliza stared at him. "I don't understand." "You don't have to." He stood, moved to the bookshelf, and pulled down what looked like a journal. "But you will. Soon enough." He held the journal out to her. It was old, leather-bound, with a woman's name embossed on the cover. Sarah Thornfield. Eliza's hands shook as she took it. That's my mother's name. How do you have—" "Read it," Maddox said. "Then we'll talk." He turned and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Eliza called after him. "Check the animals. Storm's getting worse." He paused at the door, not looking back. "Get some sleep. You're safe here." Then he was gone, leaving Eliza alone with the fire, the warm cabin, and her dead mother's journal burning in her hands. Eliza sat frozen in the chair, her mother's journal pressed against her chest like a shield. The leather was cracked with age, the pages yellowed and brittle. She'd been 7 years old when her mother disappeared. 7 years old when her father came home alone, his shirt torn and bloody, telling them Sarah had run off with a traveling merchant. 7 years old when she stopped believing anything her father said. Her fingers traced the embossed name, Sarah Thornfield. Her mother had been real once, had written things down, had thoughts and secrets. And somehow this stranger, this cowboy who'd married her on a whim, had kept her mother's words safe for 15 years. The fire crackled, sending shadows dancing across the cabin walls. Outside, the blizzard screamed louder, rattling the windows. Eliza pulled the blankets tighter and opened the journal. The first entry was dated March 1863. Thomas proposed today. I should be happy. Mother certainly is. She won't stop talking about the wedding, about finally having one daughter married well. But there's something in his eyes that frightens me, something cold. When he looks at me, I feel like property being appraised, not a woman being loved. Still, what choice do I have? I'm 23. Past prime marriage age, according to everyone in town. If I refuse Thomas, I'll end up caring for Mother until she dies, then become the spinster aunt who lives in someone's spare room. I'll marry him. I'll make it work. Women have survived worse. Eliza's throat tightened. She'd never known her mother had doubts. Her father always spoke about their marriage like it had been a grand romance, like Sarah had been desperate to marry him. She flipped ahead, skimming through entries about the wedding, the move to Black Hollow, the birth of Rebecca. Her mother's handwriting grew shakier as the years passed, the entries more sporadic. May 1867. Thomas hit me today. Not the first time, but the first time he's left marks visible to others. I told Rebecca I fell down the stairs. She's only 6, but she looked at me like she knew I was lying. I need to be more careful, need to keep the house cleaner, the meals hotter, my voice quieter, need to be better. Eliza's hands trembled. She remembered those years, remembered her mother's careful makeup, her long sleeves in summer, her habit of standing in doorways instead of sitting, probably because sitting hurt too much. August 1870. Met a man today, a surveyor working for the railroad company. His name was James Whitmore, and he was looking at maps in the general store when I came in for flour. We talked for maybe 5 minutes. Just pleasantries, nothing improper. But when I left, I realized I'd smiled for the first time in months. I won't see him again. Can't. But for 5 minutes today, I remembered what it felt like to be seen as something other than a punching bag. The entries became darker after that. Her father's violence escalated. Money disappeared. Debts piled up. And through it all, Sarah kept writing, kept documenting, as if the journal was the only witness who mattered. Then came November 1873, and everything changed. I found the papers. All of them. Hidden in Thomas's desk while he was at the saloon. The railroad money, $50,000 allocated for the Black Hollow expansion, it's gone. Thomas and Mayor Hale stole it together. They faked construction reports, bribed the territorial inspector, and split the money. That's why the rail line never came through. That's why half the town lost their investments. But it's worse than theft. When James Whitmore figured out what they'd done, when he threatened to report them to the federal authorities, Thomas killed him. I found the letters. Whitmore's handwriting, Thomas's responses. The last one is dated 2 days before Whitmore's body was found in the ravine. Accident during surveying, they called it. I have copies of everything now. Evidence, proof. But what do I do with it? If I go to the marshal, Thomas will know I betrayed him. He'll kill me. I know he will. If I run, he'll hunt me down. He's told me 100 times what happens to wives who leave their husbands. He has friends everywhere, sheriffs, deputies, judges. I wouldn't make it 50 miles. But if I stay, if I do nothing, I'm complicit in murder. Eliza's vision blurred. She wiped her eyes roughly and kept reading. December 1873. I've made my decision. I'm running. Not for myself. It's too late for that. But the girls, Rebecca is 12 now. Margaret is 10. Clara is 7. And Eliza is almost 8. If I stay, Thomas will destroy them the same way he destroyed me. I've hidden the evidence in 3 different locations. Copies tucked into library books, buried in the old cemetery, sewn into the hem of my wedding dress. If something happens to me, someone will find them eventually. Tomorrow night, Thomas is playing cards with the mayor. He'll be drunk and distracted. I'll take the girls and run for Denver. We'll disappear. Change our names, start over. Please, universe, let this work. The next entry was written in a different hand, shakier, desperate. December 18th, 1873. This is Colt Maddox writing now. I'm a hunter who found Sarah Thornfield bleeding in the snow 20 miles north of Black Hollow. She's dying. I can see it. Gut shot, infection spreading, too much blood lost. She made me promise to write this. Made me swear I'd protect her youngest daughter when the time came. Eliza, she keeps saying. She's the stubborn one. She'll fight back. He'll kill her first. I told her I'm nobody. Just a drifter who hunts elk and minds his own business. I don't make promises I can't keep. But she's holding my hand with what strength she has left, crying, begging. Says her husband will come for the girls eventually. Says they'll end up dead or worse. So I'm promising. I'm swearing it. When the time comes, I'll find Eliza Thornfield and I'll get her out. Sarah died at dawn. I buried her deep in the mountains where her bastard husband will never find her. I kept the journal. Kept the evidence she died trying to protect. 15 years from now, Eliza Thornfield will be 22. Old enough to handle the truth. Old enough to choose what happens next. I'll wait. The journal entries after that were sparse. Maddox's handwriting appeared every few months, documenting his observations of Black Hollow from a distance, watching the Thornfield daughters grow up. Noting Thomas's increasing violence, Hale's growing power, the town's slow rot. The last entry was dated 2 weeks ago. Thomas gambled away his daughters. The auction is in 3 days. I've waited 15 years. Time to keep my promise. Eliza closed the journal with shaking hands. Her mother hadn't abandoned them, hadn't run off with a merchant. She'd tried to save them and died for it. And this man, this stranger cowboy, had spent 15 years honoring a deathbed promise to a woman he'd met once. The door opened, bringing a blast of cold air and snow. Maddox stepped inside, his hair white with frost, and kicked the door shut. He didn't look at Eliza, just moved to the fireplace and added more wood. "You read it," he said. Not a question. "You kept a promise to a dying woman for 15 years. I don't break promises." "Why?" Eliza's voice cracked. "Why would you do that? You didn't know her. You didn't know me." Maddox was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "My mother died when I was 10. Fever took her slow. She spent 3 days begging my father to take care of my little sister, to keep her safe. You know what he did?" Eliza waited. "Sold her to a brothel in Denver 6 months later. She was 8 years old." Maddox's voice stayed flat, emotionless. "I was too young to stop him. Too weak. By the time I was old enough to fight back, she was dead." "I'm sorry." "Don't." He cut her off. I'm not telling you for sympathy. I'm telling you so you understand. When your mother begged me to protect you, I saw my sister's face, heard my mother's voice, and I decided right then that I wouldn't fail again. Eliza's chest ached. The gold you gave Hale, that was from my mother? No, that was mine. Your mother had the evidence, not money. Maddox finally looked at her. I've been mining these mountains for 15 years, waiting, building this place, making enough money to buy your freedom when the time came. You could have just killed my father. Thought about it. Maddox's expression was grim. But murder brings federal marshals. I needed you free, legal, and proper, not running from the law with me. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Eliza tried to process everything, her mother's death, her father's crimes, this man's bizarre 15-year vigil. The evidence, she said slowly. The papers my mother hid, you have them? Some. Found 2 of the 3 hiding spots. Library books and the cemetery. Never located the wedding dress. It's in the attic of our old house, was, anyway. Father probably burned it years ago. Maybe. Maddox leaned back in his chair. But the copies I have are enough. Detailed financial records, letters between your father and Hale, Whitmore's notes about what he discovered. All of it proves theft and murder. So what do we do with it? That's up to you. Eliza blinked. What? Your mother died for this. Your choice what happens next. Maddox's pale eyes held hers. You can bury it. Move on. Start fresh somewhere new, or you can burn Black Hollow to the ground. I'll help either way. Why would anyone bury it? Because revenge is dangerous. You go after Hale and your father, they'll fight back. They've got money, power, friends in high places. You're one scarred girl with no influence. The evidence might not be enough. But you said... I said it proves their crimes. Doesn't mean anyone will care, so... Maddox's voice was brutally honest. Your father is white, male, respected in the community. Your mother was just his wife. Whitmore was just a railroad man, nobody important. Justice doesn't always work the way it should. Eliza's hands clenched into fists. So they get away with it. Probably. Unless you're willing to risk everything to stop them. What's everything? Maddox gestured around the cabin. This, safety, peace. You want revenge, you'll have to go back to Black Hollow eventually. Face them down, and when you do, they'll try to kill you. The blizzard howled louder, as if agreeing with him. Eliza thought about her sisters. Rebecca, sold to a mine owner. Margaret, bought by a rancher. Clara, dragged away by Morrison while blood dripped from her mouth. I want them to burn, she said quietly. Maddox nodded like he'd expected that answer. Then we start training tomorrow. Training. You go back down that mountain as you are right now, you'll die in about 5 minutes. I'm not watching another Thornfield woman get killed because she wasn't prepared. I can handle You can't handle anything yet. His tone wasn't cruel, just factual. You're half-starved, untrained, and you flinch every time I move too fast. Your father beat the fight out of you. We need to put it back in. Eliza wanted to argue, but he was right. She'd spent her whole life surviving, not fighting. There was a difference. How long? She asked. Winter's got us trapped up here for at least 3 months, maybe 4 if the snow's bad. Maddox stood and stretched, his joints popping. That's enough time. Enough time for what? To turn you into someone your father should actually be afraid of. Something fierce and hot ignited in Eliza's chest. For the first time since the auction platform, she felt something other than fear or grief. She felt purpose. When do we start? Dawn. Get some sleep. Maddox moved toward his bedroll. Upstairs bedroom is yours. Like I said, door locks. Eliza stood slowly, her body aching from the long ride and the cold. She climbed the stairs to the bedroom, which turned out to be surprisingly comfortable. A real bed with a feather mattress, thick quilts, even a small wood stove in the corner. A woman's room. Had Maddox built this for her? Spent 15 years preparing a place for someone he'd never met? She locked the door, testing it twice to make sure, then collapsed onto the bed, still fully clothed. Sleep should have been impossible. Her mind was too full, her emotions too raw. But exhaustion won, and she dropped into darkness. She dreamed of her mother, Sarah standing in the snow, bleeding, smiling sadly. I tried, baby girl. I'm sorry I couldn't save you myself. It's okay, Mama, Dream Eliza said. I'll save myself. She woke to the smell of coffee and frying meat. Gray dawn light filtered through the window, revealing that the blizzard had finally stopped. Snow had piled up past the windowsills, turning the world into a white tomb. Eliza dressed quickly. Her old clothes were ruined, but she found a wool shirt and trousers laid out on a chair. Too big, but warmer than her dress. She rolled up the sleeves and cinched the pants with rope. Downstairs, Maddox was cooking at the stove. He glanced up when she appeared. Coffee's on the table, eggs and venison in 2 minutes. Eliza poured herself coffee and sat. The cabin looked different in daylight, less mysterious, more practical. Everything was well made but simple, a working man's space. Maddox served breakfast without ceremony. Eliza ate ravenously, only realizing halfway through that she'd forgotten basic table manners. Maddox didn't comment, just ate his own food steadily. We'll start with riding, he said when they'd finished. You can barely sit a horse. That needs to change. I can ride. You can hang on while someone else steers, not the same thing. He stood and grabbed his coat. Out in 10 minutes. Dress warm. The barn was cold but not freezing, thanks to the body heat from the animals. Maddox led out a smaller horse, a brown mare with kind eyes. This is Maple. She's patient and she doesn't spook easy. You'll practice on her. For the next 3 hours, Eliza learned what real riding meant. Maddox was a brutal teacher, not cruel, but absolutely uncompromising. He made her mount and dismount 100 times until her legs screamed, made her walk, trot, and canter in circles until she could barely see straight. Every time she made a mistake, he corrected her. Every time she wanted to quit, he pushed harder. Again. I can't. Again. By noon, Eliza was shaking with exhaustion and rage. I said I can't. And I said again. Maddox's voice cracked like a whip. You think Morrison's going to give you breaks? You think your father's going to stop when you're tired? Again. Something in Eliza snapped. She wheeled Maple around and charged straight at Maddox, fury burning away every other thought. He didn't move, just stood there watching her come. At the last second, Eliza yanked the reins and Maple skidded to a stop inches from him. Maddox's expression was unreadable. Good. Good? You got mad. Used it. That's good. He grabbed Maple's bridle and looked up at Eliza. Anger's a weapon if you control it. Your father taught you to swallow it. I'm teaching you to aim it. Eliza's breathing was ragged. I could have hit you. But you didn't. You controlled the horse, controlled yourself, made your point without losing your head. Maddox released the bridle. We'll make a fighter out of you yet. The rest of winter followed the same brutal pattern. Every morning, Maddox woke Eliza before dawn and worked her until she thought she'd collapse. Riding, shooting, hand-to-hand fighting, tracking, survival skills. He was never gentle, never encouraging, just relentlessly demanding. But he was also fair. When Eliza did something right, he acknowledged it with a curt nod. When she failed, he explained what went wrong and how to fix it. And he never, not once, touched her inappropriately or made her feel unsafe. At night, they'd eat in silence, and Eliza would read more of her mother's journal, memorizing every detail of her father's crimes. Maddox would clean his guns or work on equipment repairs, giving her space to process. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her with that unreadable expression. Sometimes she'd want to ask what he was thinking, but the words never came. 6 weeks into their isolation, Eliza hit her first target from 100 yards. The bottle exploded in a shower of glass, and she lowered the rifle with shaking hands. Again, Maddox said. She hit the next 5 targets too. That night he gave her a revolver, a Colt Navy, well-maintained and perfectly balanced. This is yours now, he said. Wear it every day. Sleep with it. Get used to the weight. Eliza turned the gun over in her hands, feeling its deadly potential. Why are you doing this? Really? Maddox was quiet for a moment. Your mother asked me to protect you. Giving you a gun and sending you back to face murderers isn't protection. Then what is this? Teaching you to protect yourself. His pale eyes met hers. I kept my promise getting you out, but I can't fight your battles for you. Best I can do is make sure you're ready to fight them yourself. 8 weeks in, a storm knocked out part of the barn roof. Maddox went up to repair it and slipped on the icy shingles. Eliza heard the crash and ran outside to find him on the ground, clutching his left arm. "Broken," he said through gritted teeth. Eliza had watched him set a dislocated shoulder on one of the horses. She knew what needed to happen. "Let me see." "I can handle—" "Let me see." He let her examine the arm. Definitely broken, but clean. No bones sticking through. She helped him inside and set it the way he'd taught her, quick and brutal. Maddox didn't scream, but his face went white. For the next 2 weeks, Eliza took care of the ranch. Fed the animals, fixed the roof herself, kept the fire going, cooked meals. Maddox watched from his chair, his jaw tight with frustration at being helpless. "You're doing good," he said one night. It was the closest he'd ever come to praise. "Learned from a stubborn bastard," Eliza replied. His mouth twitched. "Fair." When his arm healed enough to work again, their training intensified. Maddox taught her dirty fighting, eye gouges, groin kicks, using any weapon available. He taught her how to track men through snow, how to tell if someone was following her, how to disappear. And slowly, Eliza changed. Her body got stronger, harder, her reflexes sharpened. The fear that had lived in her chest since childhood transformed into something colder and more useful. She started looking at the world the way Maddox did, always evaluating threats, always planning escape routes, always ready. 3 months into winter, during a knife fighting lesson, Eliza finally landed a hit on Maddox. Just a touch to his ribs, not a real attack, but enough to count. He stepped back and nodded. "You're ready." "Ready for what?" "Whatever comes next." Spring arrived slowly, melting the snow inch by inch. As the trails opened up, Eliza knew their isolated peace was ending. Soon she'd have to decide. Bury her mother's evidence and run, or go back to Black Hollow and burn it all down. One morning, Maddox came back from checking his trap lines with news. "Ryder came through the lower valley. Says there's talk in Black Hollow. Your sisters." Eliza's blood went cold. What kind of talk? Clara ran away from Morrison. He caught her, beat her bad. She's in the doctor's office, but Morrison's threatening to take her back. The rage Eliza had been learning to control surged up, white-hot and lethal. When? Soon as the main road clears, maybe a week. Eliza stood and walked to the window, staring out at the melting snow. All winter she'd trained for this moment. All winter she'd imagined riding back to Black Hollow with her mother's evidence and her new skills. But she'd imagined doing it on her terms, in her time. Clara didn't have time. "I'm going," Eliza said. "I know." She turned to look at Maddox. "You'll help?" His pale eyes were hard as winter ice. "I kept your mother's secret for 15 years, trained you for 3 months. You think I'm backing out now? This could go bad. Federal charges, murder accusations, powerful men fighting back. We could both end up dead." "Could," Maddox agreed. "But your father killed my sister when she was 8 years old. Not directly, but might as well have. I've got my own reasons for wanting Black Hollow to burn." Eliza crossed the room and extended her hand. "Partners?" Maddox looked at her hand for a moment, then took it. His grip was firm, solid. Partners. Over the next week, they prepared for war. Maddox gathered every piece of evidence: the journal, the financial documents, the letters. Eliza practiced her story, memorizing every detail until she could recite it in her sleep. They cleaned weapons, checked ammunition, planned routes. The night before they were set to leave, Eliza couldn't sleep. She went downstairs and found Maddox sitting by the fire, staring into the flames. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Never sleep much before a fight." Eliza sat in the chair opposite him. They'd spent months in this cabin together, but had barely talked about anything personal. Everything had been focused on training, surviving, preparing. "Why do you live up here alone?" she asked. Maddox was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, easier than dealing with people. "That's not a reason. It's the only one you're getting." Eliza smiled despite herself. "You sound like me 3 months ago. You were smarter 3 months ago." "How do you figure?" "You knew when to keep your mouth shut." But his tone was almost teasing. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down. Outside, spring rain pattered against the windows. "Thank you," Eliza said eventually, "for everything." "Don't thank me yet." We might both die tomorrow. Still, you kept your promise. More than that, you gave me a chance to fight back. Nobody's ever done that before." Maddox looked at her, and for the first time she saw something other than cold calculation in his eyes. Something almost gentle. "Your mother was brave," he said. "Died trying to save her daughters. Least I could do was make sure one of them survived to finish what she started." "We'll finish it," Eliza said. "Together." Maddox nodded. Together. At dawn, they rode down the mountain toward Black Hollow, with the evidence packed carefully in Maddox's saddlebags and vengeance burning in their hearts. The trail down to Black Hollow was nothing like the frozen hell they'd climbed 3 months ago. Spring mud sucked at the horses' hooves, and swollen streams cut across the path every few miles. What had taken 3 hours in winter now stretched to 6, then 7. Maddox pushed them hard anyway, his jaw set in that expression Eliza had learned meant he was calculating odds and didn't like the numbers. They stopped once to water the horses at a creek that hadn't existed during the blizzard. Eliza's hands shook as she filled the canteens, not from cold this time, but from something that felt dangerously close to fear. "Second thoughts?" Maddox asked, reading her like he always did. "No." Eliza capped the canteen harder than necessary. "Just thinking about Clara." "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't think about her until we're close enough to do something." Maddox checked his rifle's action, his movements automatic. "You start imagining what Morrison's done to her, you'll lose focus. Can't afford that." He was right, but that didn't make it easier. Eliza mounted Maple and tried to push Clara's screams from her memory. Tried not to picture her baby sister's split lip, Morrison's hand around her throat. They reached Black Hollow's outskirts just after sunset. The town looked exactly the same. Weathered buildings, muddy streets, the church steeple rising against the darkening sky. Smoke drifted from chimneys, carrying the smell of burning coal and cooking meat. Normal. Peaceful. Eliza's stomach turned. "We're not riding straight in," Maddox said, steering his stallion toward a stand of trees east of town. "Need information first." They made camp in a hollow that provided cover but still gave them a view of the main road. No fire, despite the evening chill. Maddox disappeared into the gathering darkness, while Eliza tended the horses and forced herself to eat jerky that tasted like sawdust. He returned an hour later with a thin kid maybe 15 years old. The boy's eyes went wide when he saw Eliza. "Holy hell, that's her! That's the Thornfield girl everyone thought was dead." "Shut up and sit down," Maddox said, not unkindly. "Tell her what you told me." The kid, he said his name was James, couldn't stop staring at Eliza while he talked. "Morrison's got your sister locked up in his ranch house. Won't let the doctors see her no more. Says she's his property, and he'll tend her himself. But my cousin works at the general store, and she heard Morrison bought rope and a branding iron last week, so..." Eliza's hand went to her revolver. Maddox's fingers closed over her wrist, a warning. "What else?" he asked James. "Your other sisters, Rebecca and Margaret, they're trying to get the marshal involved, but he won't do nothing. Says it's a domestic matter." James shifted uncomfortably. "A lot of people in town are angry about it, actually. Nobody likes Morrison, and what he did to Clara was... it was bad. Real bad. But nobody's got the guts to stand up to him." "Where's my father?" Eliza's voice came out flat, dead. "Gambling house, probably. That's where he spends most nights since you disappeared. Him and Mayor Hale, drinking and playing cards like nothing happened." Maddox pulled out a silver dollar and tossed it to James. "You didn't see us. You don't know anything. Understand?" "Yes, sir." James pocketed the coin and scrambled to his feet. "But, Miss Thornfield? I'm glad you're alive." "A lot of us are." He vanished into the darkness before Eliza could respond. Maddox checked his weapons, methodical and calm. "Morrison's ranch is 5 miles northwest. We hit it tonight while he's drunk." "Just the 2 of us?" "3 if your sisters help, 4 if we're lucky and Clara can move." He met her eyes. "But probably just us." Eliza's training kicked in, pushing emotion aside. "What's the approach?" "Front door, fast and loud. We're not sneaking around, that gets people killed. We go in hard. Get Clara. Get out." "And if Morrison fights back?" "Then he dies." Maddox said it like he was discussing the weather. "Your choice, though. He's your sister's husband, legal and proper. Killing him brings complications." Eliza thought about Clara's scream, the blood on her lip. Morrison's hand backhanding a 14-year-old child he'd bought like livestock. If he gets in our way, she said carefully, I'll put a bullet in him myself. Maddox's mouth twitched in that almost smile. That's my girl. They rode out within the hour, staying off the main roads and using game trails Maddox seemed to know by heart. The moon was half full, giving just enough light to navigate by. Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs, but her hand stayed steady on the reins. Morrison's ranch appeared through the trees, a sprawling operation with a main house, bunkhouse, and several barns. Lights burned in the main house windows. Eliza could see shadows moving inside. 3 men in the bunkhouse, Maddox whispered, his eyes tracking movement. 2 in the main house, Morrison and probably one of his hands. How can you tell? Practice. He dismounted and tied his stallion to a tree. We go to the back door, quieter. Once we're inside, speed matters more than stealth. Eliza's hands shook as she checked her revolver. 6 bullets. She'd fired thousands of practice rounds over the winter, but never at a person, never with intent to kill. Maddox saw her hesitation. You don't have to do this. I can go in alone. No. Eliza's voice was stronger than she felt. She's my sister. They approached the house from the east, using the barn as cover. Maddox moved like a ghost, barely making a sound despite his size. Eliza tried to mimic him, placing each foot carefully. The back door was unlocked, careless, arrogant. Maddox eased it open and they slipped inside. The kitchen was empty, dishes piled in the sink. Eliza could hear voices from deeper in the house, rough male laughter, the clink of bottles. Her stomach churned. Maddox pointed toward a hallway, then to himself. I'll check there. He pointed at Eliza, then upstairs. You check up. She nodded and started climbing, wincing every time a board creaked. The second-floor hallway stretched in both directions. 4 doors, all closed. Eliza tried the first one. Empty bedroom. The second one, storage, filled with dusty furniture. The third door was locked. Clara? She whispered. Silence. Then a small, broken voice. Eliza? It's me, honey. I'm getting you out. The door's locked. He has the key. Eliza stepped back and kicked the door hard, right next to the handle. The frame splintered but held. She kicked again, putting all her weight behind it. Downstairs, the laughter stopped. What the hell was that? Morrison's voice slurred with drink. Eliza kicked the door a third time, and it crashed open. Clara was huddled in the corner of a bare room, wearing nothing but a torn nightgown. Her face was a mass of bruises, one eye swollen completely shut. Rope burns circled her wrists. Oh, Clara, Eliza's voice broke. He said you were dead. He said nobody was coming. I'm here now. Eliza pulled off her coat and wrapped it around Clara's shoulders. Can you walk? I think so. Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs. Morrison appeared in the doorway, his face red with rage and whiskey. The hell do you think you're doing in my house? Eliza put herself between Morrison and Clara, her hand on her revolver. Taking back what you stole. Stole? Morrison laughed, mean and ugly. I paid for her. Got the papers and everything. She's mine. She's 14 years old. She's my wife. Legal contract. You can't just... Eliza drew a revolver and pointed it at Morrison's chest. Her hand didn't shake. Try and stop me. Morrison's eyes widened. For a second, genuine fear crossed his face. Then his expression hardened and his hand moved toward the pistol at his belt. Eliza fired. The bullet caught Morrison in the shoulder, spinning him around. He crashed against the hallway wall, screaming and clutching the wound. Blood seeped between his fingers, dark and wet. You shot me! You crazy bitch shot me! More footsteps on the stairs. 2 ranch hands appeared, guns drawn. Eliza swung her revolver toward them, and they froze. Drop the guns, she said. Lady, we don't want trouble. Then drop the guns and get out of my way. They looked at Morrison, who was sliding down the wall, leaving a blood smear, then at Eliza's steady aim. The guns clattered to the floor. Smart, Eliza said. Now help me get my sister downstairs. One of the hands, younger, maybe 18, stepped forward carefully. I'll carry her, miss. She knows me. I've been sneaking her food when Morrison wasn't looking. Eliza studied his face and saw genuine concern. What's your name? Tommy, miss. Okay, Tommy, you carry her, but if you try anything, I won't. I swear. Tommy moved past Eliza and gently lifted Clara, who whimpered but didn't resist. It's okay, Clara. We're getting you out. They made it downstairs to find Maddox holding another ranch hand at gunpoint. The man's nose was bleeding, and he looked terrified. 3 in the bunkhouse stayed put, Maddox reported. This one tried to be a hero. Not anymore, the man said quickly. I'm good. I'm real good. Morrison's screams echoed from upstairs. I'm bleeding out. Someone help me. You'll live, Eliza called back. Shoulder wounds aren't fatal, unfortunately. Maddox's eyebrow rose. You shot him? He reached for his gun. Good. Maddox stepped aside, letting Tommy carry Clara toward the door. We're leaving now. Anyone follows us, I start killing people. Clear? The ranch hand nodded frantically. They made it outside without further incident. Tommy helped settle Clara on Maple while Eliza mounted behind her, holding her sister carefully. Clara was crying silently, her body shaking. It's over, Eliza whispered. You're safe now. He said he'd find me if I ran. He said he'd kill me. He's not going to find you, and if he tries, I'll kill him first. Clara turned her head, her one good eye focusing on Eliza. You're different. Yeah. Eliza adjusted her grip on the reins. I am. They rode hard for town, Tommy running alongside on foot until Maddox finally pulled him up behind him on the stallion. The kid didn't complain, just held on tight. Rebecca and Margaret were staying at the boarding house on the edge of town, the only place that would rent to fallen women, according to James. Eliza pounded on the door until a gray-haired woman in a nightgown answered, looking furious until she saw Clara. Sweet mercy. Get her inside. They carried Clara to a room on the second floor. Rebecca and Margaret appeared in nightgowns, their faces shocked. Eliza? Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. They said you were dead. They said Maddox killed you. I'm fine. We need a doctor for Clara. I'll fetch him, the boarding house woman said, already moving. Rebecca pushed past Margaret and threw her arms around Eliza, sobbing. I thought I'd never see you again. I know. Eliza hugged her back, feeling tears she'd been holding since the auction finally broke free. I know. I'm sorry. They laid Clara on the bed. In the lamplight, the extent of Morrison's abuse became horrifyingly clear. Burns on her arms, whip marks across her back, bruises everywhere. Margaret made a choking sound and ran for the wash basin. Maddox stood in the doorway, his expression carved from stone. I should have let you kill him. Still might, Eliza said. The doctor arrived 20 minutes later, an older man named Patterson who'd been in Black Hollow since before Eliza was born. He took one look at Clara and his face went pale. I need everyone out except one person to help me. I'll stay, Rebecca said. Eliza, Margaret, and Maddox waited in the hallway. Tommy had disappeared, probably heading back to explain to Morrison why he'd helped steal his property. The boarding house woman brought coffee that nobody touched. Finally, Patterson emerged. She'll live. Nothing's broken, though it's close. The burns will scar, but I've seen worse. Mostly, she needs rest and safety. She'll get both, Eliza said. Patterson studied her face. You're Thomas Thornfield's daughter, the one who disappeared. I'm not his daughter anymore. Good. Patterson's voice was hard. Because what he did, selling you girls like that, it's been eating at this town. A lot of folks are ashamed they didn't stop it. They should be, Maddox said from behind Eliza. Patterson's eyes flicked to him, recognition dawning. Colt Maddox, haven't seen you in civilized parts for years. Wasn't planning to stay. Then why come back? Keeping a promise. The doctor looked between them, clearly trying to piece together the story. Well, whatever you're planning, do it fast. Morrison's got friends, and so does your father. Once word spreads that you shot Morrison and took Clara, there'll be hell to pay. Let it come, Eliza said. Patterson shook his head. You've got more spine than sense, girl, but I won't stop you. I'll keep Clara safe here as long as needed. After he left, Rebecca came out and pulled Eliza into another crushing hug. Thank you. Thank you for saving her. I should have saved all of you. You couldn't have. Nobody could. Rebecca pulled back, her eyes red but determined. But we can save each other now. What do you need? Eliza glanced at Maddox, who gave a slight nod. Time to play the real cards. I need you to gather everyone in this town who's sick of Father and Mayor Hale. Everyone who knows what they did was wrong. Can you do that? Why? Because tomorrow morning I'm going to burn Black Hollow's corruption down to the foundation, and I need witnesses. Margaret stepped forward, her face set. Samuel Pritchard, the man who bought me, he's decent. He's been treating me like a guest, not property. He hates what happened at the auction. He'll help. So will Billy Thompson, Rebecca added. He tried to bid on Eliza to save her, remember? His father has influence with the mining companies. Get them, Eliza said. Get everyone you can trust. Tell them to meet at the church at dawn. Her sisters nodded and hurried off, their nightgowns trailing. The boarding house woman watched them go, then turned to Eliza. You're planning something dangerous. Yes, ma'am. Good. This town needs dangerous. She handed Eliza a key. Back room is yours tonight. Nobody will bother you there. Eliza and Maddox retreated to the small room, barely big enough for one bed and a chair. They sat on opposite sides, the saddlebags with her mother's evidence between them. You did good tonight, Maddox said. I shot a man who deserved it. He leaned back, studying her. You feeling guilty? Eliza examined her emotions carefully, the way he'd taught her. No, I'm feeling like I should feel guilty, but mostly I just feel satisfied. That's normal. First time's always strange. How many men have you killed? Maddox was quiet for a moment. Enough to know the difference between murder and justice. What you did tonight was justice. What about tomorrow? What I'm planning to do to Father and Hale? That's justice too. His pale eyes were steady. Your mother died trying to expose them. Whitmore died trying to expose them. How many others have they destroyed? How many lives ruined? So we're righteous avengers? Eliza's tone was bitter. We're survivors doing what needs doing. Nothing righteous about it. Maddox stood and moved to the window, looking out at the sleeping town. Tomorrow you'll stand in front of everyone and tell them what your father did. Show them the evidence. Let them decide what happens next. And if they decide nothing, if they protect him anyway, then we take the evidence to the federal marshal in Denver and let the law handle it. Maddox turned back to her. But I don't think that'll happen. You saw Patterson's face. People are ashamed. They're ready for change. Or they're ready to protect their own interests. Maybe both. Maddox's expression was grim. Human nature's complicated. But your mother didn't die for nothing, Eliza. Even if tomorrow goes sideways, you tried. That matters. Eliza pulled her mother's journal from the saddlebag and opened it to that last entry in Maddox's handwriting, the promise made to a dying woman in the snow. She'd be proud of you, Maddox said quietly, for what it's worth. She'd be proud of you, too. 15 years is a long time to keep faith. Faith had nothing to do with it, just stubbornness. Eliza smiled despite herself. You and me both. They didn't sleep much that night. Maddox dozed in the chair while Eliza lay on the bed, fully clothed, her revolver under the pillow. Every sound made her jump. Footsteps in the hall, voices outside, the creak of settling wood. Just before dawn, Maddox stood and stretched. Time. They gathered the evidence and walked through the still dark streets toward the church. People were already arriving, more than Eliza expected. Miners with lamp-blackened faces, shopkeepers, ranchers, women clutching shawls against the morning chill, Billy Thompson and his father, Samuel Pritchard with Margaret beside him. Even some of the men who'd attended the auction were there, looking uncomfortable. The church filled slowly, people whispering and shooting glances at Eliza. She stood at the front with Maddox flanking her like a guard dog, the saddlebags at her feet. Rebecca and Margaret joined her, standing on her other side. A united front of Thornfield sisters. When the church was packed, maybe 200 people crammed into pews and standing in the aisles, Reverend Michaels cleared his throat nervously. We're gathered here this morning because it's time for the truth, Eliza interrupted, her voice carried in the sudden silence. My name is Eliza Thornfield Maddox. Some of you thought I was dead. I'm not. I'm here to tell you what really happened to my mother 15 years ago, and what my father and Mayor Hale have been hiding ever since. The crowd shifted, uneasy murmurs rippling through. Eliza pulled out the journal. This belonged to my mother, Sarah Thornfield. In it, she documented years of abuse by my father. But more than that, she documented a crime. She opened to the page about the railroad money. In 1873, Thomas Thornfield and Mayor Vernon Hale stole $50,000 allocated for the Black Hollow Railway expansion. They faked construction reports, bribed inspectors, and split the money between them. That's why the rail line never came through. That's why half this town lost their investments. Gasps. Angry shouts. Billy Thompson's father stood up, his face purple. That's a serious accusation, girl. It's not an accusation. It's fact. Eliza held up the financial documents. I have the proof, bank records, forged reports, letters between my father and the mayor discussing how to hide the money. She passed the documents to the front pew, where they started circulating. People crowded around to look, their expressions turning from skepticism to shock to rage. But there's more, Eliza continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. When railroad surveyor James Whitmore discovered the theft and threatened to report it to federal authorities, my father killed him, made it look like an accident during surveying work. Complete silence now. Even the skeptics had gone quiet. My mother found the evidence. She tried to run with us, with me and my sisters, to get us away from him and expose his crimes. But he hunted her down and shot her in the mountains. Eliza's voice cracked. She died in the snow, bleeding out, making a stranger promise to protect her daughters. That stranger was Colt Maddox. Every eye turned to Maddox, who stood stone-faced. For 15 years, he kept that promise. He waited until my father's debts forced him to auction us off like cattle. Then he married me to get me out legally, spent the winter teaching me to survive. And now we're here, with evidence that proves Thomas Thornfield and Vernon Hale are thieves and murderers. The church erupted. People shouting, demanding to see the evidence, calling for the marshal. Some defending Thomas, saying it was all lies, others yelling for his arrest. The church doors crashed open. Thomas Thornfield stood in the entrance, disheveled and drunk, with Mayor Hale beside him. Behind them were a dozen armed men, Morrison's ranch hands, some of Hale's cronies, Dutch, the auctioneer. Enough of this nonsense, Hale's voice boomed. That girl is a liar and a thief. She shot Morrison last night and kidnapped his legal wife. Clara is 14 years old, Rebecca screamed. She's a child. She's legally married, Hale shot back. And Eliza Thornfield is wanted for assault and theft. Anyone harboring her will be considered an accomplice. Thomas stumbled forward, his eyes finding Eliza. For a second, something like fear crossed his face when he saw her. Not the broken girl from the auction, but someone harder, someone dangerous. You ungrateful little bitch, he slurred. After everything I did for you? You sold me! Eliza's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. You sold all of us to pay your gambling debts. You beat Mother to death because she tried to save us, and now you're going to stand there and pretend to be the victim? Your mother was a whore who ran off. My mother is buried in the mountains with a bullet from your gun in her stomach. Eliza stepped down from the altar, walking toward her father. The crowd parted. Colt Maddox found her dying. She told him everything, and now everyone here knows the truth. Thomas's hand went to his pistol. You're coming with me, right now. No. Eliza kept walking until she was 10 feet from him. I'm not your property anymore. I'm not anyone's property. The hell you're not. Thomas drew his pistol. Everything happened at once. Maddox moved like lightning, his hand dropping to his revolver. Someone in the crowd screamed, and Eliza, drawing on 3 months of brutal training, pulled her own gun faster than her father could track. She fired. The bullet hit Thomas in the leg, dropping him. His pistol clattered across the floor. Hale's men started to raise their weapons, but suddenly found themselves facing 200 angry townspeople. Miners holding pickaxes, ranchers with rifles. Even Billy Thompson had produced a pistol from somewhere. Nobody else has to die, Maddox said calmly, his revolver pointed at Hale. But if anyone takes another step, I'll start with the mayor and work my way down. Hale's face had gone white. You can't do this. I'm the law here. You're a thief and a murderer, Samuel Pritchard said, standing up. And I, for one, am tired of pretending otherwise. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Thomas writhed on the floor, clutching his leg and cursing. Blood pooled under him, dark against the church floorboards. Eliza stood over him, her smoking revolver still pointed at his chest. This is for Mother, she said quietly, and for all of us. You'll hang for this, Thomas gasped. Murder. Attempted murder. Self-defense, Reverend Michaels said, his voice shaking but firm. I saw him draw first. We all did. Nods throughout the congregation. Marshal Pike finally pushed through the crowd, his hand on his own pistol. He was young, maybe 25, and looked completely overwhelmed. Everyone calm down. He looked at the bleeding Thomas, at Eliza's gun, at the angry crowd. Miss Thornfield, you need to lower that weapon. Will you arrest him? Eliza asked. That depends on the evidence. The evidence is right there. Eliza pointed at the documents still circulating through the pews. $50,000 in theft, murder of a Federal Railroad employee, attempted murder of his own wife. All documented. Pike looked at Mayor Hale. Sir, I need you to... Don't you dare side with these criminals, Hale hissed. I appointed you. I can remove you just as easily. Actually, you can't, Billy Thompson's father said, stepping forward. He was a tall man with iron gray hair and the bearing of someone used to being obeyed. Federal marshals are appointed by territorial authority, not local mayors, and I happen to sit on that territorial board. Hale's expression crumbled. Marshal Pike, Thompson Sr. continued, I suggest you examine that evidence thoroughly. If it's legitimate, you'll need to make arrests. Pike hesitated, then nodded. He spent the next 20 minutes reviewing the documents while Dr. Patterson tended to Thomas's leg wound, and the crowd waited in tense silence. Finally, Pike looked up. This is enough for federal charges, multiple charges. He turned to his deputies. Arrest Thomas Thornfield and Mayor Vernon Hale for theft of federal funds and suspicion of murder. The church erupted in cheers and angry shouts. Hale tried to run, but miners blocked the door. His hired guns melted away, unwilling to risk their lives for a lost cause. Thomas was still cursing when they dragged him to his feet. He caught Eliza's eye one last time. You're nothing, he spat. You'll always be nothing. Eliza met his gaze without flinching. I'm the daughter who survived you. That's something. They hauled him out, leaving a trail of blood behind. The crowd slowly dispersed, people clustering in groups to discuss what had just happened. Some looked satisfied. Others looked worried about what came next. A few shot hostile glances at Eliza, clearly thinking she'd caused trouble that would hurt the whole town. Eliza didn't care. She'd done what needed doing. Rebecca and Margaret flanked her, their faces streaked with tears. They didn't speak, just held on to each other while the morning sun streamed through the church windows. Maddox appeared at Eliza's shoulder. We should go. Morrison's still out there, and he's got friends. Let them come, Eliza said. That's brave and stupid. Pick one. Despite everything, Eliza laughed. Fine, let's go check on Clara. They made it back to the boarding house without incident. Clara was awake, propped up on pillows, looking fragile but alert. Her face lit up when she saw Eliza. Is it true? What people are saying? That Father and the mayor are arrested? It's true. Clara started crying. Not sad tears, but relief so profound it hurt to watch. Rebecca and Margaret climbed onto the bed with her, the three of them holding each other and sobbing. Eliza stood in the doorway, watching her sisters finally break down after years of holding everything together. Maddox's hand settled on her shoulder, warm and solid. You did it, he said quietly. We did it. No, this was you. I just helped. Eliza turned to look at him. 3 months ago, he'd been a stranger who'd married her to keep a promise. Now he was... what? Friend? Partner? Something more complicated than either word could capture. What happens now? She asked. Federal marshals will come from Denver. There'll be a trial. Your father and Hale will probably hang. Maddox's expression was neutral. Your sisters will need to figure out what to do with their forced marriages. The town will need new leadership. And us? Maddox was quiet for a moment. That's up to you. Cabin's still there, waiting. You earned your freedom. You can do whatever you want with it. Eliza looked back at her sisters, then at the town outside the window. Black Hollow was broken, corrupt, full of people who'd stood by while children were sold. But it was also full of people like Billy Thompson and Dr. Patterson, people who'd stood up when it mattered. I'm not finished here yet, she said. Maddox's mouth twitched into that almost smile. Didn't think you would be. Morrison came for them 3 days later. Eliza was helping Clara walk the length of the boarding house hallway when she heard horses outside. Too many horses, moving too fast. She recognized the sound now. Maddox had drilled it into her during those winter months. Trouble arriving at speed. "Get back in the room," she told Clara, already moving toward the window. "Eliza, now." Through the lace curtains, Eliza counted 8 riders pulling up in front of the boarding house. Morrison sat in the middle, his left arm in a sling from the bullet she'd put in his shoulder. The men flanking him looked mean and ready for violence, the kind who got paid to hurt people and enjoyed their work. Maddox appeared from the back room, rifle already in hand. He took one look out the window and his expression went cold. "He brought Wade Granger," Maddox said quietly. "Who?" "Bounty hunter out of Denver. Specializes in tracking down escaped wives and runaway property." Maddox's jaw tightened. "Expensive. Morrison must have sold half his ranch to afford him." "What do we do?" "We don't run. Running's what they expect." Maddox checked his rifle's action. "You armed?" Eliza touched the revolver at her hip. "Always." "Good. Stay behind me and don't shoot unless you have a clear target. Granger's fast." They went downstairs together. The boarding house woman, Mrs. Chen, Eliza had learned, was already at the door with a shotgun cradled in her arms like she knew how to use it. "They want the girl," she said without preamble. "Told them she's under my protection, but Morrison says he's got legal papers." "Legal papers don't mean much when you beat a 14-year-old half to death," Eliza said. "Preaching to the choir, honey." Mrs. Chen cocked the shotgun. "But these boys don't look like they care about right and wrong." Morrison's voice boomed from outside. "Send out Clara Thornfield, or we're coming in." Maddox moved to the window beside the door. 8 men, 3 with rifles, 5 with pistols. Morrison can barely use his left arm, so he's mostly for show. But Granger's the problem. He's the one in the black duster, front left. Eliza looked. Granger was maybe 40, with a scarred face and dead eyes. He sat his horse like someone who'd spent his entire life in the saddle, relaxed but ready. His hand rested casually near his revolver. "I can take him," Eliza said. "You can't." Maddox's voice was flat. "He's killed 20 men that I know about. You're good for 3 months of training, but he's got 20 years of killing. Don't be stupid." "Then what? Got. I'll handle Granger. You cover the others." Maddox glanced at Mrs. Chen. "You good with that shotgun?" "Better than good." "Then let's see if we can talk first." Maddox opened the door and stepped onto the porch, rifle held low but ready. Morrison's face twisted with rage when he saw him. "This doesn't concern you, Maddox. Girl's under my protection. That makes it my concern." "She's my legal wife." "She's a child you bought and beat," Maddox interrupted. "Federal marshals are already investigating the auction. You really want to add kidnapping to your list of problems?" Granger spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly soft. "Mr. Morrison's paid me to retrieve his property. I intend to do exactly that." "She's not property. Law says different." Granger shifted in his saddle, a subtle movement that somehow seemed threatening. "Now I respect your reputation, Maddox. Heard you're good in the mountains, but this is my territory, and I've got 8 men to your 3? Maybe 4? Don't need numbers when I've got high ground and you're sitting on horses in an open street." Maddox's tone stayed conversational. "First shot goes through Morrison's head, second through yours. After that it's chaos, and chaos favors whoever's behind cover. You willing to bet your life Morrison's that important to you?" Granger studied Maddox for a long moment. Then he smiled, cold and amused. "You'd actually do it." "Without hesitation." "Even knowing I'd kill you right after?" "Maybe, maybe not. You fast enough to beat me before I get off 2 shots. Maddox tilted his head slightly. "Want to find out?" The street went deadly quiet. Eliza's heart hammered so hard she thought everyone must hear it. Her hand stayed on her revolver, ready to draw even though Maddox had told her not to. Morrison broke first. "Shoot him! I'm paying you to sit." "Shut up," Granger said mildly. He looked at Maddox again. "This girl worth dying for?" "Made a promise. I keep my promises." "Even stupid ones?" "Especially stupid ones." Granger actually laughed. "You know what, Maddox? I believe you. Which makes this whole situation a waste of my time." He turned to Morrison. "Our contract is void. You didn't mention I'd be going up against someone crazy enough to die for principle. Morrison's face went purple. What? No. I paid you. And I'm refunding half your deposit. Keep the other half for my time. Granger's hand moved to his reins. But I'm not dying in some muddy Colorado street over a girl who probably isn't worth the trouble anyway. She's my wife. I own her. Then maybe you should have treated her better when you had the chance. Granger wheeled his horse around. Pleasure almost killing you, Maddox. Let's not make it a habit. He rode off at a leisurely pace, completely unbothered. The other hired guns looked at each other, clearly doing their own calculations about dying for Morrison's wounded pride. One by one, they turned their horses and followed Granger. Morrison was left alone, his face twisted with impotent rage. This isn't over. I'll go to the territorial judge, I'll get federal marshals, You'll shut your mouth and leave. The voice came from behind Morrison. Marshal Pike rode into view, flanked by 2 deputies and Samuel Pritchard. Behind them were maybe a dozen townspeople on horseback. Billy Thompson, his father, Dr. Patterson, even Tommy the ranch hand who'd helped save Clara. Pike pulled up beside Morrison. I got your official complaint this morning about Eliza Maddox stealing your wife. Finally, arrest that. I also got Clara Morrison's testimony about what you did to her, Dr. Patterson's medical report, and witness statements from 3 of your own ranch hands about the abuse. Pike's young face was hard. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to annul that marriage right now, sign the papers I brought, and ride out of Black Hollow. If you ever come back, if you ever contact Clara again, I'll arrest you for assault, battery, and marital rape. Those are federal charges now, case you didn't know. Morrison's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You can't. I can, and I am. Sign the papers or spend the next 20 years in prison. Your choice. The fight drained out of Morrison all at once. He slumped in his saddle, suddenly looking old and pathetic. Pike handed him papers and a pen. Morrison signed with shaking hands. Now leave, Pike said. Morrison rode away without another word, hunched over like something broken. Eliza watched him disappear down the street and felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just tired relief. Pike dismounted and approached the porch. Miss Maddox, Miss Clara is legally free now. The marriage is annulled. Thank you, Eliza said. Don't thank me. Thank Mr. Pritchard and Mr. Thompson. They're the ones who convinced me this needed doing. Pike glanced at Maddox. Though I'd appreciate it if you stopped almost starting gunfights in my town. I'll try, Maddox said, not sounding convincing. After Pike left, the townspeople dispersed slowly. Samuel Pritchard lingered, talking quietly with Margaret near his horse. Billy Thompson tipped his hat to Eliza before riding off. Mrs. Chen lowered her shotgun. Well, that was exciting. Little too exciting, Maddox muttered. Clara appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale. Is he gone? Really gone? Really gone, Eliza said. You're free. Clara's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the top step and started crying, huge gulping sobs that shook her whole body. Rebecca and Margaret rushed to her, gathering her between them. Eliza started to join them, but Maddox's hand on her shoulder stopped her. Give them a minute. They need each other right now. He was right. Her sisters needed to process together, without Eliza hovering. She'd always been the one standing apart, the scarred daughter nobody wanted. Coming back and trying to fix everything didn't automatically make her part of their circle. Come on, Maddox said. Let's check the perimeter. They walked the streets of Black Hollow together, Maddox's trained eye scanning for threats, while Eliza tried to settle her jangling nerves. The town looked different now, less oppressive maybe, but also uncertain. With Hale arrested and Thomas in jail awaiting trial, Black Hollow had lost its power structure. Nobody seemed to know what came next. Town's going to tear itself apart without leadership, Maddox observed. Hale might have been corrupt, but he kept things organized. Maybe that's what it needs. A little chaos before rebuilding. Maybe. Or maybe it'll just collapse and everyone will move on to the next mining camp. Maddox's tone was neutral, but Eliza heard the underlying question. What happens to your sisters if the town dies? They'd made it to the edge of town when Eliza spotted smoke rising from the direction of Maddox's cabin. Not the thin cooking smoke she'd grown used to during the winter, but thick black smoke that spoke of destruction. No, she breathed. Maddox saw it too. His expression went blank, that terrifying calm that meant violence was coming. Stay here. Like hell. Stay. Here. He grabbed her shoulders, forcing eye contact. If this is an ambush, they want both of us. Don't give them what they want. But your cabin is just a building. I can rebuild. His grip tightened. I can't rebuild you. Stay with your sisters. I'll handle this. Before she could argue, he was gone, moving fast toward the barn where they'd stabled the horses. Eliza watched him disappear, every instinct screaming to follow. But he was right. She'd spent 3 months learning to fight, but she still made mistakes. Rushing into unknown danger was exactly the kind of mistake that got people killed. She forced herself to walk back to the boarding house, her hand on her revolver and her eyes scanning every shadow. The streets were mostly empty, midday, with people either working or hiding from the aftermath of Morrison's failed raid. Rebecca met her at the door, her face worried. "Where's Colt?" "Checking on something. Is Clara okay?" "Sleeping, finally." Rebecca pulled Eliza inside and lowered her voice. "Margaret and I need to talk to you about something." "What?" "Samuel wants to marry me. Actually marry me, not his property. He's asked properly." Eliza blinked. "You've known him 3 months." "I know it's fast, but he's been kind, Eliza, really kind. He treats me like a person, and with everything that's happened," Rebecca twisted her hands together. "I don't want to go back to how things were. I want a real life." "Then marry him," Eliza said simply. "You don't think I'm crazy?" "I married a stranger to escape an auction. You're marrying someone you actually know and like. That's the sanest thing any of us have done in months." Eliza hugged her sister. "Be happy, Rebecca. You deserve it." Margaret appeared from upstairs looking nervous. "I heard. And I need to tell you something too." "Let me guess. Billy Thompson proposed?" Margaret's eyes went wide. "How did you know?" "He bid on me at the auction, even though he knew I was broken goods. That's either stupidity or love, and Billy never struck me as stupid." Eliza smiled. "You want to marry him?" "I think so. He's sweet, and he makes me laugh, and he doesn't care that I was sold to Samuel first. But is it too soon? Am I being foolish?" "Probably," Eliza said honestly. "But life's short and cruel. If you found something good, hold on to it." Her sisters both hugged her at once, and for a moment it was like being children again, before the auction, before their mother died, before everything fell apart. "What about you?" Rebecca asked when they pulled apart. "You and Colt?" "We're—" Eliza paused. What were they? Partners? Friends, maybe? "He looks at you like you're the only person in the room," Margaret said quietly. "He looks at everyone like that. It's just his face." "No, it's different with you. Like you matter in a way other people don't." Eliza didn't know what to do with that information. Maddox had married her to keep a promise, trained her to survive, helped her get revenge on her father, but that was duty, not affection. Wasn't it? She was saved from having to respond by the sound of horses returning. Eliza rushed to the window and saw Maddox riding in, his face smudged with soot and his expression murderous. She met him outside. "What happened?" "Cabin's gone, burned to the foundation." Maddox dismounted stiffly. "Found tracks. 5 riders came in from the east. They set fires in multiple places, made sure it burned fast." "Your father's friends," Eliza said. It wasn't a question. "Probably. Revenge for putting him in jail." Maddox's voice was flat, emotionless. "Everything I built for 15 years, gone." Eliza's chest ached. "I'm sorry, this is my fault." "It's not your fault, it's theirs." Maddox's pale eyes met hers. "And they made a mistake." "What mistake?" "Thinking burning my home would make me back off." His smile was cold and dangerous. "All they did was piss me off." Over the next week, things in Black Hollow spiraled in directions nobody anticipated. The federal marshals arrived from Denver, 3 hard-faced men who spent days reviewing evidence and taking testimonies. Thomas and Hale were formally charged with theft of federal funds, conspiracy, and murder. The trial was set for 2 months out, which meant both men sat in jail while the town slowly reorganized itself. Billy Thompson's father took over as interim mayor, installing reforms and rooting out corruption. The marshal appointed deputies from among the townspeople who'd stood up at the church. New businesses started opening, replacing the ones that had depended on Hale's protection. Black Hollow was changing, painfully and slowly, into something that might actually survive. But Thomas's allies, the ones who'd grown rich off corruption, weren't ready to surrender. Threats started appearing, notes nailed to doors, dead animals left on doorsteps, fires in empty buildings. The message was clear: back off or escalate. "They're trying to scare us into dropping the charges," Marshal Pike said during a meeting at the new town hall. He looked exhausted, purple circles under his eyes. "If we push forward with the trial, they'll retaliate. Could get ugly." "It's already ugly," Billy Thompson countered. "We can't just let them win." "I'm not suggesting we let them win. I'm saying we need to be prepared for violence." Eliza sat in the back row, listening to the debate. Maddox stood against the wall near her, his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. Samuel Pritchard stood up. "What if we brought in more federal support? Marshals from other territories. Already requested it. They're stretched thin dealing with Indian conflicts and railroad disputes. We're low priority." "So we're on our own," Dr. Patterson said grimly. "For now, yes." The meeting dissolved into arguments about posting guards, organizing patrols, stockpiling weapons. Practical discussions that would have been impossible a month ago when Hale controlled everything. Afterward, Maddox pulled Eliza aside. "They're coming." "Who?" "Your father's allies. They're not going to wait for the trial. They'll try to break him out or kill everyone who testified against him. Probably both." "How do you know?" "Because it's what I'd do in their position." Maddox's eyes were cold. "They've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. We need to be ready." "Ready how?" "Defensively. Pick the battleground, control the approach, make them come to us on our terms." Eliza understood immediately. "The boarding house. It's where Clara and my sisters are staying. They'll target it." "Exactly. We fortify it, set up sight lines, prepare fallback positions, turn it into a fortress. Mrs. Chen won't like having her home turned into a battlefield." "Mrs. Chen is already loading extra shells for her shotgun. She knows what's coming." They spent the next 3 days preparing. Maddox directed the work with military precision, barricading windows, reinforcing doors, stockpiling food and ammunition. Tommy and several other young men volunteered to help, along with some of the miners who'd stood up in the church. Rebecca and Margaret moved into the boarding house full-time, bringing their soon-to-be husbands as additional defenders. Billy Thompson turned out to be a decent shot, and Samuel had military experience from the Civil War. Clara stayed in her room on the second floor, still healing but improving daily. Sometimes Eliza caught her watching the preparations with old eyes. Too old for 14. "Do you think we'll die?" Clara asked one night when Eliza came to check on her. "No," Eliza lied. "You're not very good at lying." "Then yes, maybe we'll die, but we'll take some of them with us." Eliza sat on the edge of the bed. "You scared?" "Terrified. But also," Clara paused, searching for words. "Also angry, really, really angry. Morrison hurt me and nobody stopped him. Father sold us and people just watched. I'm tired of being afraid." "Good. Stay angry. Angry keeps you sharp. Colt taught you that, didn't he?" "Among other things." Clara studied her sister's face. "You love him." Eliza stiffened. "I don't... You do. I can tell. The way you watch him when you think nobody's looking. The way you always know where he is in a room. That's just tactical awareness. He taught me to always know my surroundings." "If you say so." Clara's smile was small but genuine. "But I think you love him, and I think he loves you too, even if you're both too stubborn to admit it." Eliza left before the conversation could continue, her chest tight with emotions she didn't know how to process. Love was a luxury she couldn't afford to think about, not with violence coming. They came on the 8th night. Eliza was on watch at the second-floor window when she saw movement in the darkness. Shadows detaching from shadows, moving with purpose toward the boarding house. "They're here," she called softly. Maddox appeared beside her instantly, his rifle ready. "How many?" "Can't tell. At least 10, maybe more." "More," Maddox confirmed, his eyes tracking movement Eliza couldn't see. 20, maybe 25. They're serious this time." He moved to the stairs and raised his voice. "Positions! Everyone to positions!" The boarding house came alive. Samuel and Billy took the downstairs windows. Tommy and the miners spread out across the second floor. Mrs. Chen positioned herself in the kitchen with her shotgun and a grim expression. Rebecca and Margaret armed themselves with pistols, their faces pale but determined. Clara insisted on loading ammunition, her hands shaking but steady enough. The attackers didn't bother with stealth once they were spotted. They rushed the boarding house in a wave, firing as they came. Windows shattered, wood splintered, the world exploded into gunfire and screaming. Eliza fired through the broken window, her training taking over. Aim, breathe, squeeze. A man went down clutching his chest. Aim, breathe, squeeze. Another stumbled backward. Beside her, Maddox fired with mechanical precision, each shot finding its target. But there were too many of them, and they kept coming. Downstairs, Samuel shouted a warning. The front door crashed open and men poured through. Billy's pistol cracked repeatedly. Mrs. Chen's shotgun boomed like thunder. "Fall back," Maddox ordered. "Second floor, now!" They retreated up the stairs in controlled chaos. Samuel came last, firing behind him to cover their withdrawal. A bullet caught him in the shoulder and he stumbled, but Margaret grabbed him and hauled him up. The attackers swarmed into the boarding house like locusts. Eliza counted at least 15 still standing, their faces twisted with rage and bloodlust. Maddox pulled out a stick of dynamite. "What the hell?" Eliza shouted. "Insurance." He lit the fuse and tossed it down the stairs. "Everyone get back!" The explosion was deafening. The staircase collapsed in a shower of splinters and dust, creating a barrier between the ground floor and the second. The attackers screamed and scattered, several caught in the blast. But now they were trapped upstairs with no escape route. "What's the plan?" Billy asked, his face white with shock. "We hold until dawn," Maddox said. "Marshal Pike knows we're under attack. He's gathering reinforcements. And if reinforcements don't come, then we make sure we're expensive to kill." The attackers regrouped and started shooting up through the floor. Bullets punched through the boards, forcing everyone to stay low. Eliza crawled to Clara's room and found her sister pressed against the wall, tears streaming down her face. "I've got you," Eliza said, pulling Clara close. "I don't want to die." "You're not going to die. I won't let you." A man's head appeared at the blown-out window, climbing the outside wall. Eliza shot him without hesitation. He fell backward with a scream, but more were coming. Climbing the walls, finding handholds in the damaged structure, they were adapting, changing tactics. Maddox saw it too. "We can't hold this position. Need to move to the roof." "The roof?" Rebecca looked horrified. "It's higher ground and harder to climb. Move. Now." They scrambled up the ladder to the attic, then out through a hatch onto the slanted roof. The night air was cold and clear, stars brilliant overhead. Absurdly beautiful for a battlefield. Below, Black Hollow was waking up. Lights appeared in windows. Voices shouted. But whether they were coming to help or just watching the show, Eliza couldn't tell. The attackers poured onto the second floor, their triumphant shouts carrying clearly. They thought they'd won. Then Maddox shot the one in front, and they realized their prey had escaped to higher ground. "Give up!" someone shouted from below. "You're surrounded! Nowhere to run!" "Come up and get us!" Maddox shouted back. They tried. 3 men started climbing the outside wall toward the roof. Eliza and Billy shot 2 of them. The third made it over the edge before Samuel put a bullet through his head. The body slid down the roof and fell into the street with a wet thud. "This is insane," Margaret whispered. She was reloading her pistol with shaking hands, tears streaming down her face. "We're all going to die." "Maybe," Maddox said, "but we'll die free. That's more than most people get." Eliza looked at him, really looked, and saw no fear in his expression, just acceptance. He'd lived his whole life preparing to die violently. This was just another day. But Eliza refused to accept it. She hadn't survived the auction, survived the winter, survived everything just to die on a roof in Black Hollow. "There has to be another way," she said. "There isn't. There's always another way." Eliza scanned the surrounding buildings. The boarding house sat on the corner of Main Street, with the general store to the left and the old church to the right. Maybe 15 feet separated them from the church roof. "You're insane," Maddox said, reading her thoughts. "You got a better idea?" He didn't. None of them did. "We jump," Eliza said. "One at a time. Get to the church, get to the ground, run for the marshal's office. That's a 15-foot gap. Then we'd better jump far." Billy started laughing, slightly hysterical. She's right. She's absolutely insane, but she's right. They heard footsteps pounding up the attic ladder. Out of time. Rebecca first, Eliza ordered. Then Margaret, then Clara. Samuel and Billy, you're next. Tommy, you and the miners after them. What about you and Colt? Rebecca asked. We'll cover the retreat, then jump last. Rebecca looked like she wanted to argue, but another gunshot from below made the decision for her. She backed up, got a running start, and leaped across the gap. She made it, barely, crashing onto the church roof and rolling. Margaret went next, then Clara, who screamed the whole way but landed safe. The men followed one by one, some making it gracefully, others barely catching the edge and having to be hauled up. Finally, it was just Eliza, Maddox, and Mrs. Chen, who'd refused to leave until everyone else was safe. You first, Mrs. Chen said to Eliza. I'm not. Go, Maddox snapped. Eliza ran and jumped. For a moment she was airborne, suspended between buildings with nothing but darkness below. Then she hit the church roof hard enough to knock the wind out of her. Mrs. Chen came next, landing with surprising grace for a woman her age. Maddox was about to follow when their father appeared at the roof hatch. Thomas Thornfield somehow escaped from jail, his face twisted with rage and a pistol in his hand. You ruined everything, he screamed at Eliza. Everything. I should have killed you the day you were born. He fired. The bullet caught Maddox in the shoulder, spinning him around. He staggered, trying to keep his balance on the slanted roof. Eliza screamed and raised her own pistol, but the angle was wrong and Thomas was already ducking back through the hatch. Maddox's foot slipped on loose shingles. For one terrible moment, he teetered on the edge. Then he jumped. He didn't make it. His hands caught the church roof's edge, but his injured shoulder couldn't hold his weight. He hung there, boots scrabbling for purchase, blood streaming from the gunshot wound. Eliza and Samuel grabbed his arms and pulled. Maddox's face went white with pain, but he didn't make a sound. They hauled him up and over, collapsing in a heap on the relatively safe church roof. You idiot, Eliza gasped, pressing her hand against his bleeding shoulder. You stupid, idiotic... Kept my promise, Maddox said through gritted teeth. Got you out. You're not allowed to die, you hear me? I won't allow it. Wasn't planning on it. Below them, reinforcements finally arrived. Marshal Pike and 24 armed townspeople poured into the street surrounding the boarding house. The attackers tried to scatter, but there was nowhere to run. It was over. Thomas Thornfield was dragged out of the boarding house in chains, screaming about unfair persecution and corrupt marshals. Eliza watched from the church roof, feeling nothing but exhausted relief. Dr. Patterson arrived to treat the wounded. Maddox's shoulder was bad, but not fatal. The bullet had gone clean through. He'd lost blood, but would survive. You're lucky, Patterson said while bandaging the wound. Few inches lower, and it would have hit your lung. Wasn't luck, Maddox said. Was bad shooting. He's delirious, Eliza told the doctor. He's always like this, Patterson replied. Insufferable even when dying. They spent the night in the church, too exhausted and shaken to do anything else. Clara slept between Rebecca and Margaret, safe for the first time in months. The men took turns keeping watch, though the danger had passed. Eliza sat beside Maddox, who'd refused a bed and was slumped against the wall instead. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? Getting shot? For keeping your promise, all of it. Eliza took his hand, rough and calloused and warm. For everything. Maddox was quiet for a long moment. Then his fingers tightened around hers. Wasn't just a promise after a while, he said. Became something else. What? He looked at her, his pale eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. You really don't know? Eliza's heart hammered. I'm not good at guessing. Then I'll be clear. I love you, Eliza Thornfield Maddox. Probably have since you stood on that auction block with your chin up and murder in your eyes. Definitely by the time you shot Morrison and told him you'd kill him yourself. The world stopped. You love me. That's what I said. I'm scarred and broken, and I shot my own father. You're fierce and strong, and you survived what should have killed you. You're the most remarkable person I've ever met. Maddox's thumb traced her knuckles. So yeah, I love you. If that's something you can live with? Eliza started crying, too overwhelmed to stop. I love you too. I'm not sure what it's supposed to feel like, but whatever this is, it's close. Maddox smiled. A real smile this time, not that almost twitch. Close enough. He pulled her down and kissed her, gentle, despite everything. Eliza kissed back, tasting blood and smoke and something like hope. When they pulled apart, she rested her head on his uninjured shoulder. Now what? She asked. Now we rebuild. The cabin's gone, but we can build another one. Better one, maybe. In the mountains? Wherever you want. You're free, Eliza, really free. Your father's going to hang, the corruption's broken, your sisters are safe. Maddox's arm tightened around her. You can go anywhere, do anything. Eliza thought about it. Thought about leaving Black Hollow, starting fresh somewhere new. Thought about the cabin in the mountains where she'd learned to fight, to shoot, to survive. Thought about the man who'd spent 15 years keeping a promise to a dying woman. I want to stay, she said. Help rebuild Black Hollow into something better. Make sure Clara and my sisters have a real future. That could take years. Then it takes years. She looked up at him. Will you stay with me? Maddox kissed her forehead. Wouldn't dream of being anywhere else. Outside, dawn broke over Black Hollow, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A new day. A new beginning. And for the first time in her life, Eliza Thornfield Maddox looked at the future and saw possibility instead of fear. The trial of Thomas Thornfield and Vernon Hale took place 6 weeks later in a packed courthouse that smelled like sweat, tobacco, and barely contained rage. Every seat was filled, with more people crowding the aisles and spilling out onto the street. The territorial judge, a stern woman named Catherine Reeves, who'd traveled from Denver specifically for this case, sat behind the bench looking like she'd seen every variety of human ugliness and wasn't impressed by any of it. Eliza sat in the front row between Maddox and Clara, her hands clenched so tight her nails drew blood. Across the aisle, her father sat in chains, looking smaller somehow. Prison had hollowed him out, turned him from a threatening presence into something brittle and pathetic. He wouldn't look at her. Hadn't looked at her once since the trial began. Mayor Hale sat beside him, equally diminished. The man who'd once controlled Black Hollow with an iron fist now looked like an aging merchant who'd gambled on the wrong investment. The prosecution may call its first witness, Judge Reeves said. The territorial prosecutor, a sharp-eyed man named Mitchell, stood and called Dr. Patterson to the stand. The doctor testified about treating Sarah Thornfield's mysterious injuries over the years, the pattern of abuse he'd documented but felt powerless to stop. Why didn't you report it? Mitchell asked. Patterson's face was grim. To who? The mayor was Thomas's friend. The marshal worked for the mayor. I did what I could, treated her injuries, tried to convince her to leave. But she had 4 daughters and nowhere to go. Next came the financial expert from Denver who'd analyzed the railroad documents. He walked the court through the theft in excruciating detail. How Thomas and Hale had created false invoices, bribed inspectors, funneled $50,000 into their own accounts over the course of 2 years. Is there any possibility this was a mistake? Mitchell asked. An accounting error? None. This was deliberate, systematic fraud. The prosecution paraded witness after witness. Ranch hands who'd seen Thomas beat his wife. Townspeople who'd witnessed the auction. The young surveyor's assistant who'd worked with James Whitmore and testified about his suspicions regarding Whitmore's death. Clara took the stand on the 3rd day. She looked tiny in the witness chair, her bruises faded but still visible. The prosecutor handled her gently, asking simple questions about her marriage to Morrison and what happened after. Did your father know what Morrison was doing to you? Mitchell asked. Yes. Clara's voice was barely audible. Rebecca wrote to him begging for help. He never answered. Why do you think that was? Objection, Thomas's lawyer shouted. Calls for speculation. Sustained, Judge Reeves said. Rephrase, Mr. Mitchell. Did your father ever attempt to help you after you were sold to Morrison? No, never. When it was the defense's turn, Thomas's lawyer, a slick Denver attorney named Carlson, who was clearly only there for the money, tried to paint Clara as an unreliable witness, a traumatized child whose memories couldn't be trusted. Isn't it true you were delirious from fever when you claim Morrison beat you? No, I was conscious for all of it. But you were in pain, confused. I know what happened to me. Clara's voice grew stronger. I remember every second, every hit, every burn, every time he— That's enough, Judge Reeves interrupted, her expression sympathetic. The court understands. Mr. Carlson, move on. Eliza testified on the fourth day. She walked through finding her mother's journal, discovering the evidence, everything she'd learned about the railroad theft and Whitmore's murder. Mitchell had her read selected passages from the journal aloud, Sarah's words filling the courtroom like an accusation from beyond the grave. When Carlson cross-examined her, he went straight for the throat. Miss Thornfield, excuse me, Mrs. Maddox, isn't it true you shot your own father? Yes. You attempted to murder him. I shot him in the leg when he drew a weapon on me during a church service. Self-defense as witnessed by 200 people. But you did shoot him. You're clearly capable of violence against family members. I'm capable of defending myself, Eliza said evenly. Something I had to learn because my father spent my entire childhood beating me. Objection. I'll allow it, Judge Reeves said. The witness may continue. Eliza met her father's eyes for the first time. He flinched. My father taught me that violence is how you control people, Eliza said, her voice carrying across the silent courtroom. He beat my mother to death, beat his daughters, sold us like livestock when we were no longer useful. Yes, I shot him, and I'd do it again to protect my sisters. Carlson tried to discredit her further, but the damage was done. The jury, 12 men and women from neighboring counties, chosen specifically because they had no ties to Black Hollow, looked at Thomas with undisguised disgust. Maddox testified on the fifth day. He described finding Sarah dying in the snow, her confession about the theft and murder, the promise he'd made. Carlson tried to paint him as an opportunist who'd manipulated a vulnerable woman, but Maddox's flat, emotionless delivery made it clear he didn't care what anyone thought. You married Eliza Thornfield for her inheritance? Carlson suggested. She had no inheritance. Her father gambled it away. I married her to fulfill a promise to her mother. How convenient that this promise also came with potential access to stolen railroad money. I make my own money. Don't need to steal someone else's. Then why spend 15 years because I made a promise? Maddox, pale eyes fixed on Carlson like a wolf sizing up prey. I keep my promises. That concept might be foreign to you, but some people still have principles. The gallery erupted in scattered applause. Judge Reeves banged her gavel for silence. The defense tried to create doubt about Sarah's death. Maybe she'd run off like Thomas claimed. Maybe the journal was forged. Maybe Maddox had killed her himself and framed Thomas. But then Mitchell produced the physical evidence. The bullet removed from Sarah's skeleton, which matched the caliber of Thomas's service revolver. The location of her grave, exactly where Maddox said he'd buried her. Soil samples, fabric from her dress, everything supporting Maddox's testimony. On the sixth day, Thomas finally took the stand. It was a disaster from the first question. Mr. Thornfield, did you steal $50,000 from the Railroad Expansion Fund? I borrowed it with intention to repay. Did you have authorization to borrow federal funds? The mayor said it was fine. The mayor had no authority over federal railroad money. Did you or did you not steal that money? Thomas's face reddened. It was going to waste anyway. The expansion was delayed. Nobody was using it. So you stole it. Yes or no? I took what was owed to me. I worked on that railroad, broke my back, and they were going to leave this town to rot. Mitchell let him rant, let him expose his own entitlement and greed. Then he asked about Sarah. Your wife disappeared in December 1873. What happened to her? She ran off. I told everyone. Where did she run to? I don't know. Some man, probably. She was always... Your wife's body was found buried in the mountains with a bullet in her abdomen. A bullet from your gun. How did it get there? Thomas's mouth worked soundlessly. I don't... That's impossible. Someone's trying to frame me. Who? Who would spend 15 years keeping your wife's grave secret just to frame you decades later? That drifter Maddox, he's lying. Multiple witnesses have testified that you were violent toward your wife, that she had documented injuries consistent with severe abuse, that she told people she feared for her life. She was clumsy. She fell onto bullets? The jury looked ready to convict him right then. Even Carlson seemed to be regretting taking the case. Mitchell hammered the final nail. Mr. Thornfield, why did you auction your daughters to pay your gambling debts instead of using the money you stole from the railroad? Thomas blinked. That money was gone. I'd spent it. On what? Investments, business ventures, gambling. You spent stolen federal money on gambling, lost it all, then sold your daughters to cover new debts. Is that accurate? They were going to kill me if I didn't pay. So you sold 4 girls, the youngest only 14 years old, to men who treated them like property, to save yourself. Thomas slumped in the chair. I didn't have a choice. You had dozens of choices. You chose yourself every time. The prosecution rested. The defense had nothing, no witnesses who could refute the mountain of evidence, no alternate theory that made sense. Carlson gave a half-hearted closing argument about reasonable doubt and the unreliability of a 15-year-old promise. Mitchell's closing was devastating. He walked the jury through every piece of evidence, every testimony, painting a picture of systematic abuse, theft, and murder. He held up Sarah's journal like a holy text. This woman died trying to protect her daughters from a monster. The monster was her own husband. For 15 years, he's lived free while she rotted in an unmarked grave. Justice demands, justice requires that we finally hold him accountable. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict in a clear, steady voice. Thomas Thornfield, guilty of theft of federal funds, guilty of conspiracy, guilty of murder in the first degree. Vernon Hale, guilty of theft of federal funds, guilty of conspiracy, guilty of accessory to murder. The courtroom exploded, people cheering, crying, shouting. Rebecca and Margaret grabbed Eliza's hands and squeezed. Clara buried her face in Eliza's shoulder and sobbed. Maddox just nodded once, satisfied. Judge Reeves banged her gavel until silence returned. Thomas Thornfield, Vernon Hale, you are hereby sentenced to death by hanging, sentenced to be carried out in 30 days. This court is adjourned. Thomas started screaming then about injustice, about conspiracies, about his daughters betraying him. The guards dragged him out while he cursed Eliza's name. She watched him go without emotion. The man who'd terrorized her entire childhood was just a pathetic criminal now. Nothing more. Outside the courthouse, Black Hollow had gathered to hear the verdict. When word spread that both men had been convicted, the celebration was immediate and loud. Billy Thompson's father announced free drinks at the saloon. Someone started playing a fiddle. People danced in the street. Eliza stood on the courthouse steps with her sisters, watching the town celebrate. It felt surreal, all this joy over her father's death sentence. You okay? Maddox asked quietly. I don't know what I'm feeling. That's normal. Revenge doesn't feel how you expect it to. Is that what this was? Revenge? Justice, revenge. Same thing from different angles. Maddox's hand found hers. What matters is, he can't hurt anyone else. Rebecca's wedding to Samuel took place 2 weeks later in the same church where they'd exposed Thomas's crimes. The ceremony was simple and genuine. Rebecca in a borrowed dress, Samuel in his best suit, their vows spoken with real feeling. Margaret and Billy married the following week, in an even smaller ceremony with just family and close friends. Billy cried through his vows, and Margaret laughed and cried simultaneously. Clara stood up as bridesmaid for both ceremonies, getting stronger each day. The bruises had faded completely, and while the psychological scars would take longer to heal, she was starting to smile again. Dr. Patterson said she was doing remarkably well considering what she'd endured. She's tough, Patterson told Eliza, like her older sister. Morrison had left Colorado entirely after Claire's marriage was annulled. Rumor said he'd gone to California. Nobody in Black Hollow cared enough to verify. The day before the execution, Eliza visited her father in his cell. She didn't plan to, had no desire to see him one last time. But Maddox said sometimes you needed closure even when you thought you didn't. Thomas sat on the narrow cot, staring at the wall. He looked up when Eliza approached, his eyes red-rimmed and empty. Come to gloat? His voice was hoarse. No, come to say goodbye. I'm your father. You were my father. Past tense. Eliza gripped the cell bars. Fathers protect their children. Love them. You used us, beat us, sold us. That's not a father. That's just a man who happened to contribute to my existence. Thomas's face crumpled. For a moment he looked like he might cry. I did my best. Your best was murdering my mother and auctioning your daughters. If that's your best, Then your worst must be truly horrific. Sarah deserved— Don't. Eliza's voice cut like a blade. Don't you dare say she deserved anything. She was trying to save us from you. She died protecting her children while you were saving yourself. Thomas slumped forward, his hands covering his face. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. It's worth nothing. Sorry doesn't bring Mother back. Sorry doesn't erase 15 years of abuse. Eliza turned to leave, then paused. I hope hanging is painful. I hope you spend your last moments thinking about everything you destroyed. Eliza, please. Goodbye, Thomas. I'd say rest in peace, but I don't think you've earned it. She walked away without looking back. Behind her, her father started crying, ugly, gasping sobs that echoed through the jail. Eliza felt nothing. Whatever capacity for sympathy she might have had died on that auction platform. Maddox was waiting outside. How do you feel? Empty, but in a good way, like I finally put down something heavy I'd been carrying too long. That's closure. He put his arm around her shoulders. Doesn't fix everything, but it helps. They walked back to the new boarding house. Mrs. Chen had rebuilt after the fire, bigger and better than before. Eliza and Maddox had a room there while they planned their next move. I've been thinking, Eliza said, about the mountains. Yeah? We should rebuild the cabin, not exactly the same, but similar. A real home. You want to stay in Colorado? Thought you might want to go somewhere new. Denver or California or— My sisters are here. Black Hollow needs help rebuilding into something better, and besides— Eliza stopped walking and turned to face him. The cabin is where I learned who I really am, where I stopped being afraid. I want to go back to that. Maddox studied her face. It'll be hard work, construction through summer, racing to finish before next winter, and we'll need supplies, probably some help. We've done harder things. True. His expression softened. All right. We'll rebuild. Make it even better than before. With actual windows this time, and maybe a door that doesn't stick. Don't get greedy. Eliza laughed, a real, genuine laugh that felt foreign but good. When was the last time she'd laughed? Before the auction, certainly. Maybe before her mother died. The hanging took place at dawn. Most of Black Hollow attended, not out of cruelty, but out of a communal need to witness the end of an era. Thomas and Hale stood on the gallows platform, hooded and bound, while Judge Reeves read their sentences one final time. Eliza watched from the crowd with Maddox beside her. She'd debated not coming, letting her father die without an audience, but she needed to see it, needed to know for certain he was gone. Clara had stayed at the boarding house with Rebecca and Margaret. Too young for this, despite everything she'd survived. Some things didn't need to be witnessed. Any last words? The executioner asked. Hale said nothing, just stood there trembling. Thomas spoke, his voice muffled by the hood. I love my daughters. I did. I didn't know how to show it. Eliza felt Maddox's hand squeeze hers. The trapdoors opened. The rope snapped taut. It was over in seconds. The crowd was silent for a moment, then slowly dispersed. No celebration this time, just a quiet acknowledgement that justice had been served and now life could continue. Eliza stood there longer than most, staring at her father's body swaying slightly in the morning breeze. She was waiting to feel something, triumph, satisfaction, grief, anything. But there was only emptiness. He said he loved you, Maddox said quietly. Love isn't something you claim. It's something you do. He never did. Eliza turned away from the gallows. Let's go home. They spent that summer rebuilding the mountain cabin, working dawn to dusk in the thin, high-altitude air. Billy and Samuel came up to help, bringing supplies and extra hands. Tommy the ranch hand joined them, along with several miners who appreciated what Eliza and Maddox had done for Black Hollow. The new cabin rose slowly, larger than the original, with proper windows and a stone foundation that would last decades. They added a second bedroom for when Clara visited, and a larger kitchen where Eliza could actually cook without bumping into everything. Maddox taught her carpentry while they worked, the same way he'd taught her everything else, with brutal honesty and zero patience for mistakes. That beam's crooked. Take it down and do it again. It's close enough. All right? Close enough gets your roof collapsing in winter. Do it right or don't do it at all. They argued constantly, but it was different from the arguments Eliza remembered from childhood. These were disagreements between equals, not a powerful person crushing a weak one. When Eliza was right, Maddox admitted it. When she was wrong, she fixed it without resentment. Clara visited twice that summer, each time looking healthier and more like herself. She was living with Rebecca and Samuel, helping with their new general store. Margaret and Billy had bought a small ranch and were raising horses. "We're okay," Clara told Eliza during her second visit. "All of us. We're actually okay." "You sound surprised." "I am. After everything that happened, I thought we'd be broken forever. But we're not. We're just different." "Different how?" Clara thought about it. "Harder, maybe, but also kinder. We know what real cruelty looks like, so we recognize real kindness when we see it. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." Eliza hugged her sister. "I'm proud of you. You survived something no one should have to survive." "We all did. We survived together." By late September, the cabin was finished. It stood solid and strong against the mountain backdrop, smoke rising from the chimney into the crisp autumn air. Eliza stood in the doorway looking out at the valley below and felt something she'd never experienced before. Peace. "Not bad for 5 months' work," Maddox said, coming up behind her. "Not bad at all." He wrapped his arms around her waist, and she leaned back against his chest. They stood like that for a while, watching the sun set over the mountains. "You ever regret it?" Maddox asked. "Marrying a stranger, spending months learning to fight, all of it?" "Every day." He stiffened. "What?" "I regret that it had to happen at all. That my father was so broken, he destroyed his own family. That my mother died trying to save us. That Clara was tortured by a man who owned her." Eliza turned to face him. "But I don't regret what came after. Meeting you, learning to fight, finding my strength. That part I'd do again in a heartbeat." Maddox's expression softened. "You know you don't need me anymore, right? You're strong enough on your own now." "I know, but I stay anyway." "Why?" "Because strength isn't just about surviving alone. It's about choosing who you want beside you." Eliza stood on her toes and kissed him. "I choose you, every day, not because I need you, but because I want you." "That's sappy as hell." "You started it with the sentimental questions." "Fair point." They went inside and made dinner together, venison stew with vegetables from the small garden they'd planted. It was simple food, nothing fancy, but it tasted better than anything Eliza could remember eating. After dinner, she pulled out her mother's journal and read through it one more time. She'd read it dozens of times by now, knew most passages by heart. But she kept coming back to that last entry in Maddox's handwriting. "I'll wait." 2 words that had changed everything. "What are you thinking about?" Maddox asked from his chair by the fire. "Promises. How you kept one for 15 years to someone you barely knew." "Wasn't complicated. She asked, I agreed, I followed through." Most people would have forgotten after a week, or decided it was too hard. Most people aren't worth much then. Maddox set down the piece of leather he'd been working into a new gun holster. "Your mother died trying to protect you. Least I could do was make sure her death meant something." "It meant everything." Eliza closed the journal. "Because of her, because of you, we're all free now. Really free." What will you do with that freedom? It was a question Eliza had been thinking about for months. She had options now, money from the recovered railroad funds that Judge Reeves had ordered split among the victims, including the Thornfield daughters. She could go anywhere, do anything. "I want to help people," she said slowly. "Women specifically. Ones trapped like we were." "How?" "I don't know yet. Maybe start a house in Black Hollow where they can go. Teach them to shoot, to ride, to defend themselves. Give them options besides marriage or servitude." Maddox nodded slowly. "That's good. Practical. You think I can do it? I've seen you shoot a man, jump between buildings, and stare down your father on the day of his execution without flinching. Yeah, I think you can do it." Eliza smiled. "Then that's what I'll do. We'll keep the cabin as home base, but spend time in town helping rebuild. Make Black Hollow into something worth staying in." "We? Unless you have other plans?" "Not a single one." Maddox stood and crossed to where she sat, pulling her up into his arms. "Wherever you go, I go. That was the promise I made your mother, and it's the promise I'm making you now." Even if it's dangerous? Especially if it's dangerous. I'm not letting you face the world alone. They kissed, and for the first time, it didn't feel like two broken people clinging to each other. It felt like two whole people choosing each other despite, or maybe because of, all the scars. That winter was the opposite of the one before. Instead of brutal training and survival lessons, it was peaceful domesticity. They read books by the fire, cooked elaborate meals just because they could, made plans for the house they'd build in Black Hollow come spring. Clara visited for 2 weeks at Christmas, bringing Rebecca and Margaret and their husbands. The cabin was crowded and loud and chaotic, exactly what a home should be. On Christmas Eve, they sat around the fire sharing stories about their mother. Rebecca remembered Sarah singing while she worked. Margaret remembered her gentleness with injured animals. Clara remembered how she'd always saved the best pieces of meat for her daughters. Eliza shared passages from the journal, the parts that showed Sarah's strength and intelligence, the ways she'd documented evidence knowing it might cost her life. She was braver than all of us, Rebecca said quietly. She was, Eliza agreed, but she'd be proud of what we've become. We didn't just survive, we rebuilt. We made something better. To Mother, Margaret raised her glass. Who gave everything to protect us? To Mother, they echoed. The toast hung in the air like a benediction. Spring came early, melting the snow and opening the trails. Eliza and Maddox rode down to Black Hollow to find the town transformed. New businesses had opened. The corrupt officials had been replaced with people who actually cared about the community. Billy Thompson's father had been elected mayor and was already implementing reforms. Eliza bought a large house on the edge of town, formerly owned by one of Hale's cronies who'd fled after the trial. She turned it into exactly what she'd imagined, a refuge for women with nowhere else to go. The first resident was a woman named Sarah, which felt both painful and appropriate. She'd run from an abusive husband in Wyoming, walked for 3 days to reach Black Hollow after hearing rumors about a place where women could be safe. You're really going to help me? Sarah asked, her face bruised and her hands shaking. I'm going to teach you to help yourself, Eliza corrected. Show you how to shoot, ride, survive on your own. Then you can decide what you want. Stay here, move on, whatever. But nobody owns you. Not anymore. Over the next year, more women came. Some stayed, some left once they'd healed and learned skills. Eliza taught them everything Maddox had taught her: self-defense, marksmanship, horse riding, wilderness survival. Not because every woman needed to become a fighter, but because every woman deserved the choice. Maddox helped when he could, but mostly he gave Eliza space to build something that was entirely hers. He worked as a hunting guide, bringing in money and supplies. Sometimes he'd come back from trips with women who'd heard about the refuge and wanted help. Black Hollow grew around them, transforming from a corrupt mining town into a real community. Not perfect. Nowhere was perfect. But better. Honest. On the second anniversary of the auction, Eliza stood on the exact spot where the platform had been. Someone had planted flowers there, wildflowers, the kind her mother used to love. She didn't know who'd done it, but it felt right. You okay? Maddox asked, appearing beside her. Yeah, just thinking about how much has changed. Regrets? None. Eliza took his hand. 2 years ago I was broken and terrified, standing on a platform while men bid on me like property. Now I'm free, strong, and helping other women find the same freedom. If someone had told me this was possible back then, I wouldn't have believed them. You made it possible. You fought for it. We fought for it together. She looked up at him. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Sure you could have. You're the strongest person I know. Strength isn't just about doing things alone. It's about knowing when to accept help, when to stand with others, when to build something bigger than yourself. Eliza gestured at the town around them. Mother tried to do it alone and it killed her. We did it together and we won. Maddox pulled her close. Your mother would be proud, not just of what you did, but of who you became. Eliza thought about that, about the frightened girl on the auction block and the woman she'd become, about promises kept and justice served, about the difference between surviving and actually living. I hope so, she said. I really hope so. They walked back to the refuge house together, where 3 new women had arrived that morning seeking safety. Eliza would teach them to shoot tomorrow, show them they had power, choices, futures, because that was the real victory. Not the trial, or the execution, or even the rebuilt town. The real victory was in every woman who learned she didn't have to be property, every girl who discovered her own strength, every person who chose freedom over fear. Thomas Thornfield had tried to destroy his daughters. Instead, he'd created women who couldn't be broken, women who'd built something better from the ashes of his cruelty. That night, Eliza added a final entry to her mother's journal. "Mother, it's Eliza, the last daughter, the scarred one, the stubborn one. I wanted you to know we made it, all four of us. We're not just surviving, we're building lives worth living. Rebecca runs a general store with Samuel. Margaret raises horses with Billy. Clara is studying to be a teacher. And me? I'm teaching women to fight back, just like you tried to teach us. Your death wasn't meaningless. You saved us, even though it cost you everything. We carry your strength forward every day." The man you trusted with your dying breath kept his promise. He saved me, trained me, loved me. We're married for real now, not just papers. Building a life in the mountains you died trying to reach. I miss you. We all do. But we're okay. More than okay. We're free. Thank you for fighting for us. Thank you for never giving up. Thank you for being brave enough to try. Your daughter, Eliza Thornfield Maddox. She closed the journal and put it on the shelf, next to Maddox's rifle and her own revolver. Tools of survival, all of them. Reminders of where they'd been and what they'd overcome. Outside, the sun set over the Rocky Mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Eliza stood at the window watching, Maddox's arm around her waist, and felt something she'd spent her whole life searching for without knowing it. Home. Not a place, but a feeling. The knowledge that she belonged to herself, that she'd earned her freedom through blood and courage and the refusal to break. The scarred woman from the auction platform was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who'd learned that survival wasn't enough. You had to build something worth surviving for. And that's exactly what Eliza did, day by day, woman by woman, choice by choice. She built a legacy of freedom her mother would have been proud of. In the end, that was the only revenge that mattered. Not her father's death or Hale's conviction, but the simple act of living well, of taking the cruelty and pain they'd inflicted and transforming it into something good. The auction had been meant to destroy them. Instead, it became the catalyst for everything that followed, for strength, for justice, for love, for freedom. And freedom, Eliza had learned, was worth any price, worth any fight, worth every scar. She carried them all proudly now, the physical ones on her face, the emotional ones in her heart, the invisible ones that marked every woman who'd ever survived what should have killed her. They were proof of endurance, proof that cruelty doesn't win, not really, not if you refuse to let it define you. Eliza Thornfield Maddox had been broken once, but she'd put herself back together stronger, sharper, better than before, and in doing so, she'd shown dozens of other women they could do the same. That was her mother's legacy. That was her promise. That was her life's work. And standing in the mountains with the man who'd kept a 15-year promise, watching the sun set on another day of freedom, Eliza knew without doubt she'd made the right choice. Not just surviving, but living. Really, truly living. And that made all the difference.